But just to say that it was a study that supported the preparation of the National ASCFTA Response Strategy of Mauritius, which will be launched, which will be validated on Friday at the Westin Turtle Resort and Spa. And this collaboration, the National ASCFTA Response Strategy, was prepared under the aegis of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this strategy as well is funded by the EU. Now, just to start, so I'm just going to highlight a few findings of that study. I think we all know, but I think it is worth reiterating. I'm sorry, can I please ask for us to keep it down a bit, because it does disturb presenters. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention. So I think it is worth reminding that Mauritius has undergone an impressive economic transformation since independence in 1968, and you all know the story far better than me, that we have grown from a low-income monocrop economy based on sugarcane to become a diversified economy. And as we may recall, a key element of the original success was this emphasis on establishing export processing zones that contain a lot of preferential incentives for the manufacturing sector. And just to point out that in 1985, it was in 1985 that the manufacturing-led EPZ industry overtook the sugar industry as the primary export earner and employer, and that back then in 1989, the manufacturing sector was employing nearly 90,000 people, with unemployment falling below 3%. However, as we all know, the manufacturing sector has been experiencing a continuous erosion in its importance in the economy, and this is reflected here in this graph. As you can see, the share of the manufacturing sector to the national GDP has been in constant decline since 2010, falling from 22.5% to 22.5% in 2010 to about 17.4% in 2019. We also know that the textile and clothing industry has always been the backbone of this industry during the 1970s. And I think just here to get a picture of where we are in terms of share of the different subsectors in the manufacturing industry, despite the fact that the textile and clothing industry has known a lot of challenges since 2010. For instance, in 2010, there were about 222 enterprises that were involved in the manufacturing of textiles and industry, and textiles and apparel. In 2019, about 40% of these textile and apparel firms closed down. And back in 2019, there were only 136 firms operating in the textile and apparel sector. However, textiles and apparel is still a significant share of the manufacturing sector in Mauritius, accounting for about 36% of it's still accounting for 27% of the total value added of the manufacturing sector. So this first pie of 27% represents the share of textile and apparel. And next to textiles, we see that the manufacturing sector in Mauritius is now dominated by foodstuffs. And food products, excluding sugar, account for about 36% of the total value added to the manufacturing industry. And but even then, the number of enterprises in the foodstuff sector has fallen from 2010 to 2019. It was about 144 in 2010. It became 117 in 2019. Okay, and then we see that the sugar industry has really shrunk, and but now it accounts only for 1% of total value added in the manufacturing industry in 2019. We now have about 5 establishments employing around 740 individuals. But not all is really doom and gloom, as some presenters have mentioned in the presentations. In recent years, Mauritius has kind of made, in per se, has made some inroads into the sector of precious stones and jewelry. Even though we know that the jewelry sector, as the PS mentioned in her speech, suffers from a shortage of skilled labor and limited access to modern technology. And along with jewelry, recently, that's the other component, which accounts for 26%. It's dominated by precious stones and jewelry, and also by the pharmaceutical sector. But we find that this morning we heard Mr. Abasami talking about productivity, and when we look at, for instance, how the index of value addition by industry has evolved over the last 10 years, we found that most subsectors, unfortunately, have experienced declining production output over this period 2010 to 2014. For instance, the manufacturing sector as a whole experienced a decline of over 21% between 2010 and 2019, and all manufacturing sectors experienced this decline except for computer, electronic, and optical products. If we look at in terms of employment, same story. We found that the manufacturing sector really suffered a decline in employment, but it fell by more than 13% between 2010 and 2019. And this table shows the distribution of the changes in employment by subsector. We found that employment in the textiles and wearing apparel sectors, which contributed more than 50% of manufacturing jobs, has fallen by 27%. I don't have a pointer, but it has fallen by 27%. The textiles fell by 27% in employment over this 10-year period, compared to apparel that shrunk by 1.5%. And we found that the subsectors that were considerably affected over the last 10 years in terms of fall in employment were machinery, which fell by 41%. That's denoted in red. And followed by motor vehicles, minus 32%, wooden furniture, etc. So all, lo and behold, this is just to give an overview of the manufacturing sector over the last 10 years. You know this better than I do. And some of the factors that have contributed to that is the rising competition from Asian countries, as well as rising oil prices, depreciation of the Mauritian currency, etc. So this is a bit the first part of the study that we have done. Now, this is an interesting slide because it shows again the story about poor productivity growth in the manufacturing sector in the recent years, and this is where the challenge lies. And I think that what has accounted for the slowdown in productivity growth has been limited investment, as well as, even though we know that capital productivity has been higher than labor productivity, and this is thanks to some government initiatives that were done in order to accelerate modernization of machinery, but overwhelmingly the manufacturing sector has been plagued by falling productivity. Now, trade plays an important part, has always played an important part in the economic success of the sector in Mauritius. But again, we find that we have reached a bit the limits in terms of a current model. There is a need now for new non-traditional markets. There has been a decline in the exports of manufactured products. Even though manufactured products represents about 90% of the country's total export basket. For instance, if we look at the figures, we found that the total exports of manufactured goods fell from $2.2 billion in 2015 to $1.7 billion in 2019. And within it, both the exports of textiles and agro processing as well has fallen. And then if we look at where do these exports grow, again, a message that comes out of this study and today's presentation is that there's a need to look for new non-traditional markets. I mean, even up till now, most of the Mauritian exports go to the EU, mostly the top 5 export destinations, for instance, for Mauritian textiles, South Africa, the US, UK, Madagascar, and France. Europe remains the main export destination, followed, however, by Africa, where exports amounted to about 240 million by 2019. Now, this is just the introduction to lead me to what I hope is the biggest part of the presentation, which is about the African Continental Free Trade Area. So just to summarize, we know that the manufacturing sector is running out of steam in Mauritius. There is a need to diversify into new non-traditional export markets, to get out of Europe and even Asia. And one big non-traditional export market could be Africa. When we look at the data, we found that we do export to Africa, but most of it is focused on South Africa, Kenya, and Madagascar. And also, when we look at the subsectors, we found, as the slides have shown, there is falling productivity growth. So there is a need to go into new niche export sectors. So where to find those new niche export sectors? Let us target new customer segments in new sectors, in new places. Now, I'm sure that many of you have heard about the African Continental Free Trade Area, but I don't know to what extent we really understand what it is about. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a flagship project of the African Union, and the idea is to really create, through liberalization, a continental single market for African goods and services. So the idea is simple, that these African countries, very often when you look at the data, you may find anomalies such as, you will find, for instance, that one African country imposes a higher tariff rate on the same product relative to another African country, but not relative to non-African countries. And that should not be the case. It should be easier for us as Africans to trade more easily with one another than with the rest of the world. So the idea behind the AFCFTA is to get rid of those tariff barriers and those non-tariff barriers among African countries to facilitate trade. So in a nutshell, this is what the AFCFTA is about. To make Africa a gigantic continent, treat it as a single market for goods and services, backed by the free movement of people, where goods, services, and capital and labor move free. But for that to happen, we need to remove the barriers. And a big part of those barriers are tariffs. Now, very briefly, in case this is new to you, what are some of the broader objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area? We like to say at ECA that the AFCFTA is more than a trade agreement. It is what we call a deep trade agreement. It is not only about trade. It is about trade, about investment, it is about freeing the movement of people, and so on and so forth. So the first broad objective is, as I say, to create this single market of goods and services facilitated by the movement of persons in order to deepen economic integration. But also, at the end of it, there is this big objective, number 5, which is to promote and attain sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development and structural transformation among countries. And also objective number 7, which is to promote industrial development through diversification and regional value chain development. So that's why we like to say at ECA that trade and industry are two sides of the same development coin. And that's why we want to stress that when we talk about industrialization, we cannot talk about industrialization without talking about trade. In many countries, the ministries of trade and industry are together. But in the Mauritian context, we have two separate industries. So it is very important, Madame P.S., for trade, in the Mauritian context, for the trade and industrial policies to speak to each other, for it to be coherent, and especially for the two ministries to work really closely together. And to exchange notes and make sure that these policies are walking hand in hand. And the idea behind the AFCFTA is that, okay, when you look at Africa, many African countries, they are still exporting raw materials. Zambia is exporting copper, Côte d'Ivoire is exporting cocoa. In Mauritius, we used to export sugar, but we got out of it. And then when you look at the African countries, what do we see? We see that Côte d'Ivoire is exporting cocoa at very low prices, low value added, to Switzerland. Switzerland is making its chocolate, and we are importing the chocolate. So there's a disconnect there. And you look at Zambia, it is exporting copper in raw. China will process the copper into copper utensils, God knows what, and we are importing it. And the idea here is that this has got to stop. So what is the missing link? The missing link is industrial processing. Transformation of raw materials into not only finished goods, but also industrial intermediates. So what is the big idea between the AFCFTA? Is that we need to get African countries to trade with one another. But most of the trade in today's world, when you look at the data, most of the trade is not in terms of final goods, it's in terms of intermediates. So we need to get Mauritius to buy cotton from Mali to make t-shirts and to export it to the rest of the world. That's the whole idea. Now, if you look at the specific objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area, how are we going to do that? Well, on this table, for instance, the first objective is that we need to progressively eliminate tariffs and non-tariff barriers in goods and services. Now, I don't know whether, so I think we know what tariffs are, right? It's taxes that we pay on goods and services. Now, these non-tariff barriers, this is the interesting part, because in many countries, even though we reduce tariffs, we still find it difficult to export because there are what are known as non-tariff barriers, which are regulations that accompany exports. For instance, when in Mauritius, say we want to export a product to the European Union, the tariff rate may be 0. But if the EU is telling you, listen, to be able to export to us, you need to meet environmental standards, you need to meet labor standards, you need to have a particular set of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, it means we must have a capacity to adhere to these standards. And very often when you look at the data, let me skip a few slides because when you look at the data, this data shows what non-tariff, economists, we look at tariff rates, which is easy, it's 10%, 15%. And then when you look at non-tariff measures, we try to convert it into the equivalent of a tariff rate. We call it what is the corresponding rate of an NTN. And very often, when you look at the data, these NTNs can be 4 times more higher than tariffs. For instance, this is data that some Swiss economist, Oliver Cadot, is a well-known trade economist in Switzerland. He calculated these non-tariff measures for a group of African countries per sector, and look at the rates. For instance, animals, vegetables, it's 18.3%. Now, in machinery, it's 21.7%. So, I'm not going to talk a lot. I think I'm just going to put the focus on the AFCFTA. So what we are trying to say at ECA is that, for instance, for a country like Mauritius, if you want to diversify your economy, you want to increase your exports, your manufacturing sector is running out of steam, look at Africa and try to target African countries as an additional export market, right? And the AFCFTA should be here, you as entrepreneurs. I don't know how many entrepreneurs we have in this room, but I hope there are a few. The entrepreneurs, you should also target the AFCFTA. However, as you can see, currently the AFCFTA has been launched, but it has not been implemented yet. So sometimes entrepreneurs, I live in Zambia and my landlord is telling me, Ms. Bulaki, this AFCFTA, how can I take advantage of it? And we are not quite there yet. We are going to implement it, and the negotiations are still ongoing. Like, for instance, yesterday, Mr. Danenjai Simon from BOFA, he came back from the AFCFTA Secretariat, and he was telling us, like, for instance, in phase 1, we are supposed to negotiate over tariffs and non-tariffs under Protocol 1 trading goods. We also need to negotiate over services, which is trickier. We are also supposed, under the AFCFTA, there are different protocols, we have to agree on how we are going to collaborate on investment. We have to agree on how we are going to collaborate on competition policy, on e-commerce. Now, e-commerce, that's very important for MSMEs, especially if you're on an island like Mauritius. You need to reach the markets. So these negotiations are still ongoing, they are complex, but we are getting there. Now, a first set of results is that we have managed to agree among African countries on how we are going to liberalize. So, some countries, the agreement is that all developing countries in Africa should remove 90% of tariffs, on 90% on all tariff lines, these tariffs should go. It should be reduced to 0. And you have a 5-year period to do it. However, we all know that not all countries are at the same stage of development. There are countries known as least developed countries. They have their GDP per capita is lower, like Madagascar is an LDC, Comoros is an LDC, Zambia is an LDC. Now for these least developed countries, we are going to give them some additional time to reduce their tariffs. Because when you reduce tariffs, it means government loses fiscal revenues, right? And you're losing crucial revenues to finance development. But then also within the AFCFTA, we tell countries, okay, that maybe there are some industries that you still want to protect them, they are sensitive, so we are going to give, for these, you can come up with a sensitive list, and for these groups of sensitive products, only 7% of that, for only 7% of its tariff lines, you can reduce tariffs. And you have maybe for the first 5 years, you can keep tariffs as they are, and then you liberalize later. And then there are also excluded lists where countries said, no, 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 we are not going to reduce tariffs on that. Now, the trick is, with trade agreements, is that suppose countries are negotiating. You look at, say, Mauritius and Zambia. Suppose Mauritius really exports 2 products to Zambia. It's 90% of their exports to Zambia. And then Mauritius say, no, these 2 products that we are exporting, we are going to put it in the excluded list or the sensitive list. So what does that mean? It means that we are not really cutting tariffs for Zambia. So these negotiations are tricky. And also, the AFCFTA can be an opportunity, but at the same time, we don't want to convey the impression that it is a magic bullet. The gains are not automatic. Countries will have to work hard to reap the benefits. Like, for instance, and this is very crucial for the manufacturing sector, the issue of rules of origin. Now, let me explain that. I may end my presentation on that, but I think this is the most critical for the manufacturing sector in all countries. What are these rules of origin? The idea behind AFCFTA is that we want to promote made in Africa. Now, it makes no sense for us as Africans to reduce tariffs among each other, for the Chinese and the Indians to come and invest in our country, invest on the continent, and then they bring their own labor to export tariff-free to other African countries. We are not doing this for the benefits of the other countries. We should do it for the benefits of Africans. It's about made in Africa. Now, so if Mauritius say, okay, we want to export tariff-free to Zambia and Zimbabwe, tariff-free, we have to make sure that this Mauritian product is genuinely a Mauritian product, right? If we are making a cotton or t-shirt, we want to make sure that most of the materials come from African countries, the labor is African, right? And when we export it, it is genuinely a made in African product. Now, how are we going to verify this? This is how a trade economist come with the concept of rules of origin. It's as if you have to prove, we are going to say to Mauritians, you can export tariff-free to Zambia, but if you're exporting cotton, 90% of that value of cotton must have been generated in Africa. And we have measures in place to verify that we are meeting these rules of origin requirements. And then when you say you can certify that, okay, the cotton came from Mali, the buttons came from Madagascar or whatever, then you get a certificate as an entrepreneur. So as an entrepreneur, you have to apply for that certificate, and you have to prove that your product is an African product. Now, all this has costs for MSMEs. You can imagine, if you're an MSME and Mauritius is signing all these free trade agreements, so suppose me, I am exporting cotton. I want to export to China. China will tell me you have to meet my standards. I want to export to India. India will say you have to meet my standards. I want to export to Africa, and Africa say you have to prove to us that this is genuinely African. So what do we do? What do you do as an entrepreneur? Which market do you target? So there are costs to complying with those rules of origin. So it's a complex project, but we are getting there. Countries are negotiating to liberalize tariffs and non-tariff barriers, right? The issue is about the rules of origin. They are still being negotiated. On top of that, in order to really benefit, we have to make sure that these non-tariff barriers are removed. We have to make sure that when we're exporting to each other as Africans, the transport and shipping costs are low, right? If you're a Mauritian entrepreneur and it's going to cost you $1,000 to ship to Madagascar and, I don't know, $500 to Vietnam, we are like, why should I go to Madagascar? Let me go to Vietnam. So all this must be taken into account. And a final thing, the issue of transshipment. We have to prove, for instance, that when a good is leaving Mauritius and going to Zambia, that during this process of transshipment, the good is not being altered. It's not making a stopover to another country, adding another material, so it's complex. But the key policy message is that the Mauritius manufacturing sector Mauritius could position itself as a hub for manufacturing in Africa. It could. However, you know, we will have to really strengthen capacities of Mauritian SMEs to adhere to all these trade agreements, right, to meet the rules of origin. But also the critical message is that in order for AFCFTA or any trade agreement to yield benefits to Africans or to Mauritians, we must, at the end of the day, have a solid industrial sector. Because most of the trade nowadays happen in intermediate goods. And the idea behind the AFCFTA is to get African countries to develop value chains and trade more among each other in terms of intermediates. And for that, we need to really strengthen the capacities of the manufacturing sector. We will share the slides, but that was the key message. Thank you, Mr. Doman, for indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Aruna, for this very incisive comments, and you have indeed with the EFCTA we see there is a lot of opportunity for our industrial, for the manufacturing sector. There are some challenges which we have to tackle, of course. There may be some answers to your questions also. For example, we are already importing cotton from some African countries, transforming into yarn and fabrics. So, some countries, maybe it's not Mali, but other countries. The next speaker, Mrs. Ramjanali, from the Ministry of Foreign Trade. So, Mrs. Soya Ramjanali, she is the principal trade policy analyst. She has more than 20 years experience in the ministry, and she has represented Mauritius in several negotiations and meetings dealing with COMESA issues, African Growth Opportunity Act, and other PTAs also. Over now to you, Ms. Ramjanali.
So, bon après-midi à tout le monde. Hope you are not too sleepy after a heavy lunch. And I will tell you a little bit about our market access opportunities, our FTAs, but more importantly about the challenges, about what the ministry and what government is doing to help tackle these challenges, en partenariat bien sûr avec les institutions concernées and the private sector. So you will also notice that there will be some overlapping with what previous presenters have said or told you about. But I think there will be convergence towards maximizing to the best of our ability the market access that we have and tailoring our industrial strategy in such a manner that we make the most and we expand our domestic market. Okay? So, yeah. So, as I mentioned, I will touch upon briefly the existing agreements, but importantly about actual exports versus potential exports, the challenges and the ongoing strategy. And I will also briefly touch upon trading services, though our workshop, our brainstorming is about the manufacturing sector, but services play a key role towards becoming more efficient, more competitive. Especially we saw in the times of COVID how digital trade, e-marketing, e-commerce plays a critical role. Yeah. So why FTAs, PTAs? Bien sûr, as you all know, we are limited by the smallness of our domestic market. And so it provides us with an enlarged market phase. And very importantly is that FTAs provide operators with predictability, certainty, and above all, preferential margin. Let's say, for example, with AGOA preferences, we have a preferential margin of competitive countries like Bangladesh and Cambodia. But even then, you will tell me, even despite the preferential margin that we enjoy, because the preferential margin is on the tariff, they are still competitive. These countries are still competitive because they are low-cost producers. Yeah? So grosso modo, these are the advantages of engaging into FTAs and PTAs. PTAs is preferential trade agreements. A PTA is is more limited than an FTA. It doesn't cover substantially all trade. So this map gives you a snapshot of our main exports towards main markets based on the existing FTAs or preferential trade schemes that we have. Let me emphasize here that with the US, we don't have any reciprocal agreement. The AGWA is a one-way scheme. That is, we benefit from preferences from the US without giving anything in return. But our main concern is what will happen after 2025 when the AGWA preferences are supposed to lapse. And I can tell you that Mauritius is using all diplomatic efforts to try to secure an agreement which will safeguard our market access post-2025. Yeah, so it gives you a little bit a snapshot whereby the EU is a very important market for Mauritius. As individual markets, the US is also very important. And COMESA SADC has really, with the launching of the FTAs in 2000, the COMESA and SADC markets have really been, I would say, have been beneficial to our economy because we are doing quite well on the SADC market, especially our textile. But later on, I will underline the fact that even when you talk about regional markets, as Aruna has mentioned before, we are quite concentrated in terms of the countries that we target. So this is something that we need to tackle. So this gives you a brief overview of the main provisions of our existing FTAs or preferential trade agreements. I won't go into detail, but just to tell you broadly that SADC and COMESA are free trade areas, and we have recently negotiated free trade area with China, which came into operation last year. And with India, it's a SECPA, but within the SECPA, for the trade in goods part, it's not a free trade area, it's a preferential trade area, which means that it's more limited than a free trade area. And very importantly is our EU-ESA IEPA, which is, we export a lot under the IEPA. Good. So as the previous speaker has underlined, we first major challenge, we are quite concentrated, quite, our export go to a limited number of regional partners. Madagascar, Kenya, South Africa, and Seychelles are the countries which keep on popping up when we look at the statistics. Okay? And in Europe, there again, we have countries where which absorbs a lot of our exports, and we feel that there is room to tackle other European countries like Italy, Spain, etc. But here again, we have to make sure that our investment and promotional trade policies, converge towards one direction. There is need to have convergence regarding trade policies, industrial policies, as well as investment and trade promotion strategies. Tous les chemins mènent à Rome. Yeah. So the key rules of origin, as Aruna mentioned, rules of origin, they confer nationality to a product. Okay, this is the passport that the product will have to show so as to obtain the preferential market access. And our friend from MRA Customs, our friend Rajiv, his unit plays a key role in verifying the certificates of origin and in verifying all the documents to make sure that the rules of origin have been met. Okay? So the idea is not to take you in detail throughout the specific rules of origin, but the idea is to make you reflect that the rules of origin are not the same across the RECs, across the regional economic communities or the FTAs. So I keep on telling people that if you want to target an African country, for example, whereby the country is part, let's say Madagascar, which is part of SADC, part of COMESA, and part of the AFCFTA. So in order for you to choose the best appropriate rule, you need to engage into treaty shopping. Okay? Lawyers call it treaty shopping because you need to use the criteria that will suit your specific case, depending on the raw materials that you have used, depending on where you have sourced your raw materials. Okay, let me show you. For example, AFCFTA, SADC, COMESA. So the strategy of Mauritius is, despite with the advent of the AFCFTA, our strategy is that we need to preserve our acquis with SADC and COMESA. They need to exist in parallel. AFCFTA, SADC, and COMESA. Then the operator will choose the most favorable rule suited to his product. Because as Aruna has mentioned, the AFCFTA has been launched politically, but it's not been implemented yet. It's a work in progress. It's a very ambitious project. Can you imagine more than 50 countries? And I mean, for trade to take place under preferential rules, all the countries need to have the mechanism in place for verification of rules of origin. They need to exchange the signatures. They need to have the manual on rules of origin. All this needs to be in place before trade takes place. So even when we will have the AFCFTA, so you will need to choose the rule that is specifically suited to your situation. And well, I'm sure many of you know that for many products, SADC and COMESA rules are more favorable. So it depends on your specific situation. The FCFTA is a very ambitious project. The main objective is the industrialization of Africa. And the main objective is to bring down trade barriers within Africa. But importantly, they want to use African origin raw materials for exports under the FCFTA. So, as I told you, AGWA is non-reciprocal preferences. I must say that the Pakistan preferential trade area is not very much utilized, specifically because at some point Pakistan came up with an internal tax on imports which come into their country because they want it to be a revenue generation means. And this has affected, exports to that market. We have approached them on, I think it's applied on an MFN basis to all countries. But this has really affected our exports to Pakistan. And Turkey also, it's not very much utilized. I think there are a couple of quotas under the Turkey agreement, and also some products are not covered. So this is something that we need to tackle. Yeah, so this is just for you to have an idea. You will have slides later on. Mr. Doman and his team will circulate the slides. But this is just to show you, for some products, we have juxtaposed the rules of origin. You see? So they are not the same across RECs. There is no harmonization. And the best way is for the operator to choose the one which is best suited to his own situation, depending on where he has sourced his raw materials. All right? And I can tell you that for canned tuna, we have very favorable rules under COMESA. We have change in tariff heading. But what I've been told is that our operators, they export to the maximum to the EU market, and they don't have much left for the regional market because I think we have only one cannery. So this is something that probably in the long run we need to tackle, probably try to secure investment in additional canneries or to try to seek from where to source raw materials, from where to source fish, so that we can take advantage of the existing market access. Well, very interestingly, for textile and apparel, Under the FCFTA, the rule is not yet finalized. What colleagues told me was that there are huge divergences because ideally, for Mauritius, ideally we want to get the single-stage transformation. But many countries are opposed to that, and it's not easy. So I know that we are doing very well on textile and apparel into the SADC market, to South Africa, but probably we need to see, we have recently secured quotas on the Indian market, and let's try to see how we can, strategize so that to take advantage of the new opportunities that we have. Okay? And I must also underline that apart from rules of origin, when somebody exports to any market, they also have to meet the internal requirements of that market. Sometimes there are technical requirements or sanitary and phytosanitary rules, okay? So these are all part of the game. Yeah, so this is just here to show you the unrealized potential, export potential, okay? So the shaded part is what we are taking advantage of, whereas the pale part tells us about the untapped potential. And let's say for South Africa, we have a huge untapped potential, trade potential. This has all been generated from the ITC website. And it's meant to show to you here that there are many markets where we are yet to realize the full potential. I mean, we are making some inroads, but we still have room for us to strategize and take full advantage of the existing market access. Well, the ministry has a trade portal. If we get time after the presentation, I can briefly show you how it works, because all the market access information are there, all the rules of origin, etc. It also has a few country profiles and talks about trading services and of the status of regional trade negotiations and all. Yeah? And next, let me just briefly, of course, the operators in the room know about it, but it's just to brainstorm about the different steps involved when choosing a particular regime and on choosing, which RTA you are going to opt for your product. Of course, you have to know your HS code, and you have to choose your agreement, as I told you, depending on the origin of your inputs. If you know that this market requires inputs to be originating, if this market requires a two-stage transformation for textile and apparel, and if you import your raw materials from third countries, you know that you won't be able to make inroads into that market. So you have to choose your RTA depending on the rules, depending on where you source your inputs. And you also have to keep an eye upon how your competitors are doing, of course. Okay? And if you know that your competitors' main weakness is they can't deliver on time, though they are cheap, they can't deliver on time, or they are not good in market niches, and you can specifically differentiate your product and make, really tailor-made products for specific market niches, then you have an edge over these countries. Bien sûr, what are your weaknesses, how you overcome them, and, these are all like business acumen, right? So, very importantly, the challenges and strategy. Yeah. So, bien sûr, we want our SMEs to make inroads into the regional market. But what we have noticed is that very often our SMEs, they lack information about who will buy their products, in which target market, how they will get there, how they will identify a particular supplier. And sometimes they also have lack of knowledge about the regulations in place, about, about who are the competitors for that product and that market. So there is a whole thinking about how we sort of bring the buyers and the sellers together and how we bridge the gap between the two. And export competitiveness, again, because freight is becoming very, very expensive, and with the changing global landscape and the increasing challenges after COVID, now we have the Ukraine war. So it's becoming quite of a challenge. And what operators also told us is that the difficulty to source the raw materials that they need from the region. Interestingly, the AFCFTA, they encourage the use of regional inputs, the use of regional raw materials. But many operators have told us, Madam, the material, the fabric that I need, let's say for my towels, I can't source it from the region. Or even if it's available, it's very expensive. So these are challenges. Logistical and connectivity, non-tariff barriers, bien sûr. So strategy. So our ministry has set up an interministerial committee, which is chaired by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and which brings together the main institutions and the private sector, bien sûr. And we agreed on an implementation matrix with the main challenges and the proposed solutions. So on top, we have the interministerial committee, chaired by Minister of Foreign Affairs, but just under it, we have the technical committee, which is chaired by the Director of Trade Policy, and which does the actual work of taking stock of the challenges being faced by the private sector. And we have the difficult task of coming up with proposed solutions, how to tackle those, so that our operators make maximum use of the existing FTAs. Yeah. So I can share with you, en gros, the main things that we discussed on the technical committee, which we just had last week. So the private sector told us this thing about the lack of manpower, lack of skilled personnel in some key areas, and this is something that we've been hearing since this morning. It is an issue. Okay, work permit related issues. So the Ministry of Employment is also represented on the committee. And the private sector needs to identify those areas where, là où il bloque, là, quels sont les différents shortage areas. And we're also talking about establishing information desks, key persons which operators can contact within the main institutions. Many institutions they already have, but where it is missing, how we set up those key information desks. But we also want to link it up with our trade portal. So we will reflect anything new that we do, we'll link it up with our trade portal. And we also saw that there are promotional efforts to be stepped up regarding the new FTAs. And bien sûr, identification of key markets within the EU, because EU we are concentrated, and Africa also we are concentrated. So we need to see what needs to be done for us to diversify our trade relations. Just briefly about services sector coverage. Like COVID taught us that we can't go to the high street to shop. We sit in our homes in front of our computer. We use digital services. Companies are marketing their products through e-marketing. And there are distribution and logistics logistics services involved where the product is delivered at your doorstep. So trading services are very important for any economy to be competitive. Crucial services are communication services, logistics, transport, ICT, very important, financial services. So these are key enablers to enable any economy to be competitive. And I just wanted to show you that in the main RTAs and the main FTAs, there are also services chapters. For trading services, you don't have tariffs. So you have regulations affecting trading services. Let's say a professional, a doctor, an architect who wants to go and provide these services in another market. He will need to get registered. He will need to find out what are the applicable laws and regulations he will need to adhere to. So for trading services, we have regulation. But just to show you that in the FTAs, we also have services chapters. And now, let's say for the professionals, it's up for the professional to, let's say, have mutual recognition agreements with their counterparts. So that, I know it's not easy. I know it's something which takes time, which takes a lot of energy. But at least it is there. We have just started, and incrementally we need to do something towards for our trading service providers to provide their services abroad. And SADC and COMESA also have trading services chapters. Okay, so it's not only about goods, but also services. I will end on this note. Thank you very much. And I think if you have any clarification, we'll take them after all the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya, for so many useful information. I think they will be useful to guide our enterprises. The next presenter, Mr. Girish Bhagwan Singh, he will speak about the support schemes on the manufacturing sector. Mr. Bhagwan Singh is Director Industry at the EDB, and he has several years' experience in this field. Over now to Girish.
To be three more speakers that are going to speak about incentives. So I'm going to be very brief and to explain about what are the incentives that the manufacturing sector is offering to stakeholders in Mauritius. First, I must say I'm from the Economic Development Board, and the Economic Development Board operates under the aegis of Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development. But what's important about this agency, this Apex agency, we are engaged in strategic economic planning, we are engaged in the promotion of trade and investment, we are engaged in the business facilitation, we are engaged in country branding. So we are very key, we play a very key role when it comes to the development of the industry, in fact, in the economic development of the country. So our engagement with multi-partners, be it public, private, and other sectors, even civic sector, we do have the ears to what they are proposing, because Mauritius is a small island, and the development that we are engaged is quite integrated. So we have a good middle class, and we want to get the middle class to emerge further. Coming to the incentive that we are talking, let's understand this point. I think this is very important for us to know. The previous speaker, Mrs. Bolaki, was talking about the chocolate being Switzerland and the cocoa being from Africa, and it applies for a number of products. In fact, Africa is full of raw materials. Don't forget that what you are wearing right now, the brands are definitely from Europe, US, and the clothes have been manufactured from here. We have the yarn and the fabric, we have the cotton we are growing in Africa. So it's a matter of fact that we are having a lot of raw materials, and we have not been exploiting it fully. And this has been the case when it comes to Mauritius. We don't have a big market. We are very small. We don't have raw materials also. We don't grow cotton here. We don't have a single ship. So we need to develop. And that's why since day one, in fact, Mauritius has been manufacturing since quite a long time. We have been producing. We have been producing sugar since the French time, in 17th century, I think. But the industry takes shape after independence, because after independence, we start industrializing. That's why we have 50 plus years of industrialization. But all this time, what we have been doing, when we were capturing the technology from foreign partners who were coming to Mauritius from Hong Kong or from elsewhere, we were not letting the industry to die. Even after their departure, we are keeping support to get the industry to develop and continue to exist. And this we quite understand it well, because we know very well that the wealth of a country is being created by the private sector. It's not the public sector that creates wealth. This is not its first mandate. The mandate of creating wealth is that of the private sector. So the little economy, little Mauritius, okay, has over these years been able to stand with 535 large establishments, creating employment of nearly 90,400, and even having an export of goods in 2021 of 1.3 billion USD, and contributing to the economic development of the country. But what's amazing in that engine of growth is that engine of growth has been able to export 1,548 product lines to over 120 countries. And this is very relevant in the sense like we knew that we are small, so whatever we were manufacturing was meant to different niche markets that we are having, in different countries. So we cannot go in a country and say we are going to dominate this particular market with the production that we are having. We can't do that. But what we could do is to identify niche market where we get, and in some cases, like textile and apparel, dominate that niche market in that particular subsector. So we had an approach which was quite realistic. Public, private, all parties understood this well, and that's the way we have been moving. True, which is important also, is with regards to the different, plus that we were having. We were already having a certain plus when it regards to the type of relationship we were developing with our client, which was very important. We were listening to our client. So many speakers have addressed a number of issues that I won't repeat. We were also taking advantage of our preferential access through schemes that we're having. We're actually having a number of schemes that allow us to go to EU, to USA, Africa, Asia, Indian Ocean. There was a beautiful map that was projected by my good friend from ITD. So it's all clear about that we were having access to a number of markets because since day one also, we knew that our market was small. But the rationale for the scheme, this is what is important, the way we were looking at scheme. We were looking at the interest of the bigger community, the greater community. We knew in that support of public and private, the point is to get the private also with our support, that they can create more wealth and of course more employment. And if we don't give that support, then we won't be able to succeed. And that's the reasons why private and public have had a unique relationship in Mauritius, which is not necessarily the case in all countries, a number of consultations, and today is another testimony also. Private, public are present over the same table over here to discuss how to get things to move forward, how to make things happen. So this constructive approach, which is reflected in the dialogue that we are having. In fact, the title today is also about dialogue. In the dialogue that we are having is enabling us, to listen from both sides and bring about a certain type of scheme that we feel would be relevant for the industry. And for the industry, be it small, be it medium, and be it large. So this is also very important. Second, when Mauritius started, our main market was in UK, France. So we had to diversify this market, and we did it pretty well. Had we not diversified or took advantage of the scheme, going to US, going to South Africa, going to a number of countries, we would have been putting all eggs in one basket. And our point is we have always believed to do business in the region. But things were never easy for us on the other side. We were very open, even to go to l'île de la Réunion or whether to go to other regions. There are many challenges that came our way, including logistics, including it's not easy to penetrate their distribution channel. There were a number of problems. And on top of it, we knew, like our industry, the capacity, I think Ismail spoke about that this morning. We cannot go and say we are going to have a minimum order of that much products. We cannot go like that. We were competing on minimum products, but short lead time. And that's the reason the scheme that follows come out of a rationale how to make the product offer from Mauritius competitive in that market that we are targeting. And the same will apply when it comes to the region now with the advent of yesterday Comesa SADC and ACFTA, provided, we have to take into consideration that we are a country with no raw material. The question of transformation and all that is very key for us to keep going. So in that context, Little Mauritius have been able to manufacture that number of products, contributed to an economic growth, and which World Bank qualified one moment as a Mauritius miracle. So this is the way, has been the rationale of how we have been moving forward. Yes, coming to the support scheme for the manufacturing sector, there are more than 20. They are being managed by different institutions, be it SME, Equity Fund, and of course EDB, now yesterday ISP, IFCM now, SME Mauritius, Development Bank of Mauritius, so many schemes are there. But I won't go individually to what all these schemes say. There are many speakers after me that could go in the details of it. But what I want to tell you about the direction of the schemes. We know very well till yesterday we were competing with regards to our preferential access, etc., short orders and all. And we know that tomorrow, as from now, that the competition will shift very, very fast with regards to competing through technology. We know that. And someone quoted Ford in the morning, and Ford said it so well, that industrialization is about manufacturing the best product possible at the lowest price possible. Okay, it's about that. So the absorption of technology in a country where we need to train people also to be able to deliver on that, because if machine goes down, it will affect seriously the production. There has been always the reticence about, adopting automation because of the reason of price, cost, forming people and all. Yesterday, the same thing happened when people were to use laptops. Okay, the same thing was happening to go on smartphone or even on cell phone. So there is a moment that you have to get to adapt to it, and that incentive is meant to modernize the manufacturing sector, and of course try to incentivize investment in high-tech manufacturing. We were talking about textile apparel. It was at one moment in Mauritius when we were the third, I think, major exporter of knitwear garments. It was labor-intensive at that time. Knitwear is a labor-intensive product. And now, with the advent of soft robotics is able to do the latest technology, to do T-shirts, to do shirts, which was not possible till yesterday. And at a more productive, bigger quantity, and obviously you can play with regards to today's demand, which is a demand which is more customized. It's not about a general demand. People are now looking at the new shop to have customers' demand being applied to the type of product they want. So even with regards to fashion, which is also something which is very important. Second, the scheme is also about, the access to finance. Enterprises have an issue with regards to that. Sometimes banks are not risk takers, they are risk adverse. They don't want to facilitate them on the basis of orders. See, they are looking for facilities and they suffer from cash flow issues. And that's a big difficulty for them. But we know in Mauritius, the today's giants, yesterday started in a garage. CMT started in a garage. And finally today it's a jewel. It's a reference in type of apparel industry in the world of textile apparel. Many have grown to be vertically integrated. The first company of textile, Resultant, which was manufacturing gloves. The same company has now become Artinits, vertically integrated, manufacturing even in their development, the first T-shirt which is zero carbon footprint. So just to tell you that all this have been possible with all that sort of incentive and support that came. And obviously, when it comes to export development and marketing, all this is very relevant, and there are a number of schemes which give them the necessary support. Obviously, I'll go through a couple of details to you, but let's explain a bit about, in general, before I go to certain specific cases. Now, coming to institutions, like I was saying, there are so many institutions involved in so many schemes, even for the micro companies, microcredit, Development Bank of Mauritius operate as per the regulation of banking. We have a strong banking regulation in Mauritius, which is as per the international regulations. And then we came with a number of institutions. Mr. Bidesi will explain about International Finance Corporation of Mauritius Limited, State Investment, SME Equity Fund, SME Mauritius, and Economic Development Board. But the aim at the end of the day of all this scheme is to keep our industry going, to keep our industry's product offer competitive, and to keep that the industry be industry that bring revenues And that the minister was referring in the morning, Honorable Minister, saying that in hard times, it was the industry that was bringing the necessary foreign currency to the country. So imagine those countries that had all the industry closed down. There are examples in Latin America. There are some companies, they abandoned textile at one moment. There are countries that have gone only on services, forgetting manufacturing. And with manufacturing, there are so many support that you are giving to adjacent number of industries. So this is well calculated with regards to the type of development that we want to do, despite that we know we are in the medium of Indian Ocean, we are far from the markets, we have limited labor, we need to import raw materials, logistic costs is coming more expensive, despite we know all these weaknesses that we are having, but we also have another strength. And the strength, not only in terms of scheme, etc., because we know in our industry there's also certain, from our captain of industry, from the operators, from the people working there, the necessary dose of passion, commitment, tenacity to make things happen. Yes, just come to certain scheme managed by EDB Mauritius when it regards to SME participation in international fair refund scheme. The government came forward at one moment 100,000 rupees, then 200,000 rupees annually to refund SMEs for their participation, in marketing and other promotional activities abroad. And most of the time, there are activities, there are events that are being led by Economic Development Board. But what has happened to it? What this brought? When it was referred that South Africa is one of the major export markets for Mauritius, one has to take cognizance. This has helped so many SMEs in the textile and apparel to be able to export to this particular destination. This would have not been possible if all these SMEs could not participate in different promotional events that we were having. From 7th, there is an event in South Africa, and I was surprised to see the number, what I would call good medium companies today, that are coming to these events because they have been able to develop a regular customer base there. So this scheme has been very relevant to help them to grow to a certain level. Of course, they had their challenges with COVID and all. Another scheme which was important is a trade promotion and marketing scheme. In fact, what we do in it, we were refunding 40% of the air freight costs when it comes to charges that they pay for exports to destinations like Europe, USA, and Africa. So this is very important for a country which is very far. We know our competitors, tell it in any sector, they are closer to the market than us. Kenya is exporting agro products. Textile and apparel, it's more Morocco and Turkey, Tunisia and Turkey. In any sector, our competitor are closer to the markets. And imagine, had we not devised this sort of scheme, and that's why during COVID time, the 40% refund was increased to 60%. So this is very relevant to help enterprises to reach out for their clients. And there's also the question of build the type of relationship that we want with clients. At the end of the day, clients mean market that will dictate your productions. And we have to build that sort of trust, that sort of relationship, that when the clients look to do business in the hard times, they thought of Mauritius. And that's why in the good time also they will think even more about Mauritius. So this is very important, the customer service and the support that the industry is giving. So that's why when they make the counts with regards to the cost of the product, if they compare it from Mauritius to any other country, they might find Mauritius costs a bit more. But when they add the freight costs and other charges, because this is an approach of not FOB, it is an approach of going, even at one moment, certain companies are using it, CIF, okay? So this is an approach where we are supporting in the freight costs. And this is very relevant, and this has helped enormously with regards to getting the product closer to the market. There's also the freight rebate scheme to Africa. We were talking about Africa, ACFTA. A sad reality, the intra-trade in Africa is very low. I think 16% approximately. The intra-trade in Europe is 68%. The intra-trade in North America is more than 50%. The intra-trade in Asia is more than 50%. So we have a very low intra-trade, and there are many reasons for that. So that's why Mauritius took the initiative to come with that scheme in view to encourage our operators to reach out for the 19 countries of Africa, I think, and some 40 free eligible ports to sell their products, where we are giving some refund when it comes to container. I think 300 USD for 20 feet container, 600 USD for 40 feet container. Our point is to be able to reach out to those different ports and to get our product. It has been also a strategy of ours, because till, I should say now, our major export has been going, when we start with Africa, is with South Africa, a bit of Kenya, okay? We are not going to the other countries. And how to go to these countries? Everyone suffers about this distribution channel. Everyone suffers about all this. And of course, also the question of risk when it comes to export, credit, guarantee, insurance scheme that we are giving a support, where EDB pay 50% of the credit insurance premium, and all these as per conditions, which is relevant to give the necessary support, confidence, which is very important to go and trade. We don't want anybody to say that we are going to trade there, and yes, we're not sure we're going to lose our money, etc. We want risk takers. We want to develop this sort of entrepreneur, risk takers. And we want our entrepreneur, to have the necessary confidence to go and penetrate the market of Africa. But I'm sure many conditions also apply for the product, for the market, for the client, for the trust, and all that. And last, it has been the high-tech manufacturing scheme. The high-tech manufacturing scheme is another investment where we are encouraging investment in high-tech. So we have seen in the morning MCCI speaking about what they believe are future prospects that we are having in the manufacturing of tomorrow. We're talking about pharmaceutical, we're talking about medical devices, we are talking about more high-tech. So this particular high-tech manufacturing scheme and what we propose in terms of exemption from payment of registration, etc., goes in that lines in view to encourage this sort of investment in Mauritius. And one last scheme, which is also relevant, is we had the difficulty to get our products known in Africa. And how to get the products known if you are very far away, you don't have a distribution channel. And that's the reason why we put out the Africa Warehouse Scheme. The scheme means to get our product in a warehouse which is close to them. It applies initially for Tanzania. And we were refunding nearly 60% as per condition with regards to their rental costs or merchandising costs, etc. There are some conditions that apply. We were giving that to them because we wanted our products to be more known, get it more visible, get it more known, get it more marketed, get it more merchandised. This has been the idea of coming out of this scheme, okay? And obviously, all this has brought a number of benefits. So like you see, initially there were 11 enterprises who took advantage of the scheme of TPMS, and now 229 in 2020-21, and in February of 2021 to February 2022, already 214. So imagine 272 million Mauritian rupees that have been disbursed. So products, quite a wide range of products. The same apply for boosting regional exports, because giving these facilities for us meant to be able to go to other countries, which we believe is important, and that's the reasons we are giving this support, disbursing the necessary amount. Of course, there are capping and all which it applies. I won't go into all these details, but going to give that support to our enterprises in view that they succeed. Same thing applies also for participation in international fairs, because when one developed customer, it's always more difficult to find new clients. Existing clients, you keep on the relationship. New clients, you need more efforts, more energy, more product development. And that's what we want when we are giving them the opportunity to go to the fairs. We have got most of our clients of South Africa based in Cape Town. And now what we want in South Africa is to get clients in Joburg, to get clients in Durban. What we want in South Africa, diversify not only textile, get also other products. And when we are talking about South Africa, immediately under SACU, and a number of countries that they use to serve from there, coming to us, Botswana, for example, suffering from supply from South Africa. There's a big logistic issue there. So the contacts are already established, but there came COVID and came the high cost of freight. This has played a bit against us. So behind any scheme that we are talking, there is a rationale, there is a strategy, there is an objective, and this objective is also monitored, okay? So where we want to go. Won't go in all details. I don't know if time permits with regards to other incentives that we are having for investment, because I'll go into all these details, and also about the scheme. HRDC will be talking about the scheme for training, because they are also addressing us at the end. So that's the way forward with regards to us. Move with reasonable confidence, move to get the industry to sustain its development, move to get Mauritius to prosper. Thank you very much for your attention.
Continue with the other speaker, Mr. Ramparsad, on SMEs. Mr. Ramparsad is the CEO of SME Mauritius. He has been operating for more than 25 years in the private sector companies. Over to you. I will ask the...
A sleepy good afternoon to every one of you. It's a real pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon. I know it's been a late lunch and things are starting to doze off a bit. So we'll try to be short, sweet, and put through our ideas. I am from SME Mauritius, and I'm going to talk about how we are facilitating the development of SMEs through our support schemes. SME Mauritius, no need to present more than telling you that most of our services are known to you, mostly advisory and customized support. Schemes targeting value chain improvement, something that is a bit higher up than what Girish was just talking about. He takes more on the lower side of it. We are a bit en amont. Improvement of value chains, training to enhance knowledge, skills, and managerial capabilities, networking for intra-SME trade, linkages, incubation and co-working infrastructure, which we've tried to introduce as from this year specifically, in order to get those starters to have lower startup costs, so that they can, by the time they mature with their product or their service, they have not been hit financially. So we support them with co-working infrastructure, incubation facilities that also includes mentoring and coaching. We also, we are developing common facilities, again, in order to reduce the cost of entry of SMEs into industries by giving them access to high-end technology that SME Mauritius invest in, but which can be shared by SMEs so that at their point of entry, they have high-tech machinery, they have technology that is accessible, but they do not pay for that technology, and it does not plumb their finances. What are our objectives in order to meet the requirements of an export market, of a local market, is very clear. It's all about sustainability, because every SME counts for us, okay? And it is important that when people go to invest and they take the risk of investing rather than choosing a job or being employed by somebody, they go and invest whatever they've saved. It's important for us to ensure that they are sustainable, that they stay over time, and that they at least have something to pass on to their children. Growth is key to sustainability. It works on each other. So we ensure that they grow, that they have an escalation plan in order to develop. And we ensure also that they are adaptable, that they get the element of resilience in their operations, because when faced with headwinds, especially in those testing times, it's important that SMEs have this inbuilt resilience to face headwinds the way that we are having right now. Therefore, for us, we push them towards optimal efficiency, both in terms of economy and in terms of productivity. Trying to use their resources and getting a maximum output out of it to improve their productivity. We try to develop in them a culture of quality that serves them both mostly with their local markets or markets, export markets, if they are on that market. A culture of innovation, so that they don't rest on their laurels or whatever they've acquired, and there is a constant thrust in them, a need for innovation. and it keeps them in line with emerging market trends. Also, improved customer responsiveness, because it's important for them to respond to the changing requirements of their customers. Therefore, most of our schemes are geared towards improving either one of those functional areas, which gives, because at the end of the day, what we want to see is that we have a community of SMEs that is thriving, and for them to thrive, we have to support them. For us to support them, we have to give them customized support, despite the fact you have lots of them. So there is what you call the phenomenon of mass customization in our schemes. Our schemes, it's in front of you, you will notice ICDS advisory and support. It is internal capability development. The term itself tells you what the aim is. It is the development of the internal capabilities. In other words, all our schemes and the objectives of our schemes and whatever they cover is mapped on the value chain of those organizations, of those SMEs, so that SMEs have the flexibility of choosing from our menu of schemes whichever scheme suits them most after having had a proper diagnosis of their needs. Therefore, nothing goes astray. Neither are we giving them a solution that is not a solution. So we have advisory services, we have process re-engineering, lean manufacturing, all terms that you may have heard since this morning, productivity, financial restructuring, monitoring, hand-holding and mentoring, accreditation to standards, we were talking about quality, intellectual property this morning, His Excellency Vincent de Geer mentioned it, the necessity of having standards, accreditation to standards and international ones. Intellectual property, again mentioned this morning, and its importance if ever you want to develop a market that is sustainable, because with brands come a certain customer loyalty that brings you sustainability and long-run business. Marketing design and tools, you have barcoding and technical training. I'll come to training separately. This is for internal capability development, meaning within the functional areas of the value chain of any SME. Then you have technology and innovation scheme. This is what we call TINS. And you have digital transformation, online presence, social media, mobile apps, technology, ERP or such tools. Then we move on to the greening part, ecological part. Green technology, water treatment, solar PV, and recycling. The MSS is marketing support scheme. We do not replicate or duplicate what EDB does, but there are certain gaps in that support that we come to plug. And the MSS is very popular, but unfortunately, due to COVID closures, it has not been used as it should have been over the past 2 years or so. But we talk about international compliance. Somebody mentioned international compliance this morning. E-cataloging, training and learning, administrative grants on exports, being listed on international selling platforms, international market prospection, but not duplicating the services offered by EDB or the schemes of EDB, networking, and administrative grants for trade. And all this supported by another thing that we have brought in as innovation. It is inclusiveness and integration, because we believe that when you are limited with your resources, instead of going for pure competition, at times it does help to think about cooperation. Therefore, we have started incentivizing cooperation among SMEs, intra-SME cooperation. And the objective is to get them to work together so that they can identify areas where there can be synergy, where there can be productive synergy, and therefore competitiveness and eventually profitability. So we are incentivizing it. In a modest way, I would concede, but what is important is that the seed is sown, and we can only build on it. On the progress of our schemes, it's important I just wanted to share a few figures with you. During the year 2021, we considered 676 applications. Those small units, insignificant very often when you see it in the wide economic landscape, had a cumulative turnover of 2,857,000,000 rupees. Not bad at all, isn't it? And they were employing 3,954 people. You see? When you look at it, you're shocked because how is it that the small units, very, as I said, insignificant in our economic landscape, can produce or can employ that much? So far this year, over the first 7 months, up to 8 months, we have considered 567 applications. They have a cumulative turnover of 1.6 billion, very telling, and they employ 2,193 people. You will notice that the average help has gone down, the figures, turnover figures have gone down, and the employment figures have gone down. Anyone knowing why? Most probably. It's because they are the smaller ones and they have suffered most from COVID. It's very telling. Despite that, when you look at the total, over the past 2 years, we have considered 1,243 applications for our schemes, for the schemes I just defined for you. They have a cumulative turnover of 4.5 billion, and they employ 6,147 people. Again, surprising that insignificant actors in our economy carry so much of weight. What does it teach us as lesson? That there is a glaring asymmetry in institutional support and consideration towards SMEs, because we see them as many small, and we don't see them as many small forming part of a bigger group that can carry the economic burden and the burden of economic development of our country. And it's time that we get it right. If you look at how and on what were the schemes given, internal capability development over the 2 years went to 10% of our SMEs, while technology adoption went to 78% of our help went to them. In other words, 88% of all the schemes that we give go into either improving the internal capabilities of SMEs, meaning how do you improve the functional areas that make up the competitiveness of an SME. Number two, or it went, the majority of it, 78%, went to getting SMEs to understand that it is important, helping them to acquire, to take on, to adopt technology in their manufacturing or processing process. So this is very important because very often when faced with choices, economic choices, and in moments when you have scarce resources, especially scarce rupees in your pocket, and you look at technology, very often it looks as if I have to make a huge outlay in order to get that technology. So you see it, SMEs see it as a cost, whereas in fact it is an investment in their future. And we have to switch that thinking pattern. How do we switch it? By first incentivizing them and by helping them initially. And this is what we do with the rupees that we get from authorities. This small figure tells you about the distribution of SMEs with regards to sector. MSME sector and the ones that employ most people. You will notice that the first three, meaning food and beverages, textile and related industry, very important, agriculture and farming make up a big chunk of those who provide employment. And all of them are what we've been talking since morning, manufacturing. There is a manufacturing base to it. Therefore, they are very important. They are the ones that we have to support. And the lower part, we have tourism and related activities and other services. They make up approximately 29% of all our SMEs. They are moving to 30, might be 31 now. Okay? So, these are the SMEs that employ the most people. What does it tell us? That those SMEs they are mostly from manufacturing. The manufacturing sector has lots of SMEs, and those lots of SMEs employ lots of people. And they are important for our economy. Therefore, whatever we have been talking since morning is very relevant to the future of those SMEs, and they have to be taken on board. During the second lockdown, SME Mauritius conducted a study called the impact of the second lockdown on MSMEs. We questioned approximately 600 SMEs between March and May. We confirmed certain things in May, by phone mostly, because our people were at home, so they had a lot of time. And we were questioning our customer base. We know them, we work with them. So not difficult at all to establish contact and talk. I just wanted to share this with you so that you see the element of resilience and what can SMEs bring to the table of bigger ones if ever we think that integration is key to the success of the Mauritian economy with regards to manufacturing. 97% of those we questioned said that we do not intend to lay off any employee. Incredible, in the midst of confinement, in the midst of suffering. Finally, 89, we confirmed, 89% did not lay off any employee. 59% said, if things brighten up, I am going to take more people. So what does it tell us? What lesson does it teach us? That SMEs remain a fantastic model for any economy to develop, because in moments of difficulties, they are the ones that shout less, because they know how to bear the pain better. So, how do we align with the IPSP? Because this is very important. I just wanted to map it so that we know where we are starting. We put a mark. This is where we're starting, and we are going to define and work with relevant parties to know how do we progress in line with whatever is being done at national level. So, SME Mauritius is clearly attuned and aligned with the pillars of the industrial IPSP 2020-25. It's very relevant to us, and we have already started. I just wanted to mention that our schemes have been in existence since 2020. It is the first time that it was published was in January 2020. Thankfully, or unfortunately, COVID came very soon, and our schemes were adopted by government, by authorities, to be presented as measures for, in response to COVID. So, very relevant there. We have our schemes, as you have noticed, they aim at strengthening the industrial foundation, upgrading the value chain of SMEs, we have seen it, is very relevant. Supporting local production, that's what they do. Fostering adoption of technology, and creating green and sustainable value chains. So on all the 5 pillars, yeah, our schemes are relevant and we are aligned to your IPSP. Thank you. So, and we see it in our motto that will start appearing on our website. With us, you start, you grow, and you go eco. Okay? So it will appear on our website. This brings me to the end of my presentation, and I hope you now understand what SME Mauritius does, how our schemes, what our schemes are to start with, what do they do, what do they aim, and how we align with whatever is being done at national level. I could have continued for much more time, but unfortunately, we are a bit late on our schedule, so I'm being requested to... Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rishi. Well, definitely time is of essence now. I'll be very short. First of all, I've already censored a few slides, not because they are not viewable, because of time constraint. This is number one. Secondly, I could have given my slides, 1 or 2 slides, which I have, either to Girish or to Ravin. So this could have spared me to speak. But anyway, I'll go briefly. First of all, when the discussion was there for the IPSP, we are party to it, and 3 things that captured our mind. First of all, how to drive the industrial upgrading and modernization scheme to reach the Industry 4 generation. This is number 1, a key aspect. The second thing is how to incentivize and support capital investment, which is also an integrated part of bringing value addition and global value change to the industry. And thirdly, how to prepare to leverage on the market opportunities. With this, if we have all the trade agreements, we have a fantastic market development program, but we don't have the industry turning modern, becoming innovative. If we are still with industry, 20 years old machine, with a time lag in terms of wear and tear and so on, how can the industry progress? This is a very important aspect which IFCM will talk about. Dr. Yusuf has said that IFCM will be a game changer. This is where we can become the game changer. The second thing that is important, even if we modernize, we go on marketing trips, we bring orders, but then when we go to banks, Girish has spoken about it, we don't have finance. How can we take the orders? That's why the game changer is IFCM. So I'll skip a few slides. I won't go on these details, but I'll go strictly on what we are doing today and how we can support the industry. Number 1, there are schemes that we've taken over from the Investment Support Program, ISP. These schemes, which we call LEMS, which is very popular on the market, the SME factoring scheme, which is already very popular. The schemes with commercial banks, which are there. These schemes exist. They are supposed to terminate on the 30th of June, that is at the end of this financial budget. Whether it's renewed or not, we don't know. But then we had, during a strategic meeting at level of ISP at that time, identified the gap, what the industry needs, and then we came up with our own schemes. We went to the FSC. We are today a licensed authority with FSC to provide direct support to the industry. And why this direct support can help the industry, I'll come to that. So we have what we call the creation in the budget of the MTF, the Modernization and Transformation Fund, with a line of credit which has been supplied. We are paying interest for that, of 5 billion rupees, so that we can help the industry directly in several forms. 1, we are going to do leasing directly. When we do leasing directly, what happens? The transaction cost, which we are lending money to leasing companies won't be there. So the industry will benefit with a cheaper and softer terms of conditions. Second thing, the same thing with the MTS factoring. We're enlarging the scope of the MTS factoring. I'll give a bit more details to that. And also at a rate which is much more preferential to the customer. We have introduced a credit guarantee scheme. That credit guarantee scheme is we are going to support the industry which have orders, which are viable, which can sustain, but then unfortunately, when they go to banks, the banks say, you are not eligible to get it because you don't have enough collateral to give us. So we support these enterprises by giving them what we call a guarantee to commercial banks. We are coming up with a credit finance scheme. Dr. Yusuf has spoken about supply chain financing. This is what we are going to do, is the credit financing. Girish has said that we have other measures, equity financing, that also is a part. You remember one thing, today the industry is highly geared. At a point of time when things were good, banks were willing to give loans to enterprises. Today, these companies have become very highly geared, and because of the high gearing, they are blocked in terms of getting finance. We can leverage these companies by participating in their equity, so they have more space left so that the banks can give them some more finance. Besides, we have also introduced a new scheme with the Ministry of Finance. There might be cases where even IFCM cannot give, but they are, as has pointed out, sunrise companies. The sunrise companies, they may not be getting financing from several institutions, so we're here to support them through what we call the RWG scheme. The RWG scheme is managed by the Ministry of Finance under the National Resilience Fund, and this is a scheme where if the doors are closed, but the company needs some oxygen, we can also give that. Let's talk about a bit of the current market situation on the local financial scene. There are many banks, definitely. There are leaders on the market, but then even they have lots of financial support schemes. They still have barriers. And how can we come to help these companies to overcome these barriers? So I'll go this. I say I'm censoring, so I'm censoring this one also. I'm censoring this one also. I'll go straight to what we have. So I've talked about LEMS. We have the MTF scheme. For those companies with a turnover of less than 250 million rupees, we can provide leasing facilities. Leasing factories, the difference between what we provide and what leasing companies provide. Number one is when you're modernizing, there are two factors. You have the hard part of it and the soft part. Suppose you are buying an equipment, the value of equipment is 2 million rupees, but the software is 5 million rupees. If you go to a bank, it might be difficult for you to get. If you have got an intellectual property which has value, if you go to a bank, probably for the bank, it's not a collateral, so it's not something for them that is worth. So we are trying to finance such activities. For companies who are bigger, with a turnover over 250 million rupees, we ask them to contribute a bit more, but at the same time, the interest rate, which is 2.5% for small companies, it's a bit higher for larger companies. Now, on this, I'll try to let's this one. For the factoring, all the banks who do factoring, and also the SIM factors, they were doing mainly focusing on domestic factoring. Today, we have changed as a game changer. We have changed the landscape of factoring. We have already started what we call domestic factoring. We have started export factoring. What is export factoring? If you export the goods and your customers want 90 days credit, either you wait for 90 days to get your funding, or else what you can do, you go to your bank, you say, okay, this is my invoice, can you give me the money? The banks can discount. But what the banks do when they discount, they'll take additional collateral with the company. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, the companies being geared, they don't have additional collateral to give. What we do, when we do export factoring, we cover that export factoring with an export credit insurance, and if it is covered by the export credit insurance, we finance, we give upfront cash to the company so that they get cash flow, they can order other raw materials for them to continue production. So this is what we do, export factoring. The other thing that we are going to do is the supply chain financing. What is supply chain financing? If you go to a bank, you ask for funding to import raw materials, the bank will give you, but then it's a collateralized lending. And say, suppose it is, they give you 90 days because they know your trade cycle for import and production is 90 days. They'll give you an import loan of 90 days. But then, when you have already imported 90 days, they say, okay, you have to pay me, even your goods have not been exported. So the company is in trouble because he cannot. What he does, he has to export, the company has to export and then ask for an export factoring. In our case, what we're going to do is de bout en bout. That is, you can order the raw materials, provided it is a confirmed order. We finance your import. You produce. When you produce, there's a time lag between your production and the export. It is covered under supply chain financing. You export. When you get the export proceeds, then you can pay us. In the meantime, we finance the whole supply chains. So what happens? You get your immediate cash flow. You don't have to worry. If you have got additional export orders to take, you can take the additional export orders. That is where we are. So we are trying to find financial solutions for emerging sectors whereby they can get finance to go into new industry, into the industrial development. So the last thing that I'm going to talk on is the partnership that we have avec le Fonds Solidarité Africain, African Solidarity Fund. Why we've come with that partnership with FSA? We are also lending money to vulnerable sectors. We're lending money to the industrial entrepreneurs. We are taking the risk because we have borrowed money. We need some backup. The role of FSA is to counter guarantee at national level or at industrial level. So the partnership we are entering with FSC is for them to give us a line of guarantee, to partner along with us, to help us by de-risking part of our portfolio, credit portfolio. So that is on. We have an expert working with us already in Mauritius, and most probably we are gearing towards, probably it will come very soon, towards creation of a national guarantee fund as it exists in many countries elsewhere. So the fact that time is a constraint, I'm going to stop here most probably. But before I end, I would, for the last speaker who is coming to speak, I just motivate him or her. There's a saying that said, those entrepreneurs who sit down until the last speaker speaks are those who are successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bidesi. Without any, we'll shift to the presentation of Mrs. Dr. Tejal Vagji, who is a senior research development of.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, so finally, the last presentation. So I'll just be very, very brief, 2 minutes of your time. So I'm Tejal from the Research Division of the HRDC, Human Resource Development Council. And for Just one sec. Okay, so the HRDC, Human Resource Development Council, for those of you who don't know, we are under the aegis of the Ministry of Labor. And, in fact, our main mandate is to create synergies between industry and academia. And something else is we try to bridge the skills gap. So just rapidly, this is the ecosystem in which we operate. So as you can see, we have the different partners, enterprises, education, and training. And most importantly, we have these two elements to focus on. So our schemes, our skill development schemes, try to focus on unemployed youth and individuals and existing employees. So these are just a few schemes that we have. Most common one, the Levy Grant Scheme that you already know. And you'll see that 45 million was invested for the upgrade of skill in the particular manufacturing sector and training about 5,700 people in this sector. Now, you'll agree with me that unemployment, youth unemployment in general, has a lot of challenges associated with it, has a lot of issues associated with it. The first one, they come from a sort of vulnerable portion of the society. They tend to fall out of the education system. Secondly, on the other hand, you'll see that there's a lot of demand for medium or low-level technical skills in the sector in general and in other sectors also. And you see that not only in manufacturing, but in other sectors also, enterprises are not willing to invest too much money on people. Why? Because of the high cost of training, and mostly because of poaching. People tend to leave just after. So that's why we had to come with different schemes, different skill development schemes to help the try to tackle the different issues associated with unemployment in general. So we came up with one of the most important schemes that we have right now, and it's the National Skill Development Program. You must have heard about that. What is in fact the National Skill Development Program? We could tell that it's something just to, not really to reskill, but to try to help employers in a certain specific sector to get their people trained. And we have different components to that. I'll just go rapidly, taking into consideration, our realities, our challenges, and also resources that we have. These objectives, the objectives of the NSDP, has been crafted around the collaboration, the synergy between these three partners. Again, industry, so enterprises, training providers, and unemployed. We won't just mention unemployed youth because the NSDP is for unemployed in general. And the criteria to be part of this scheme for an unemployed to be part of this scheme, they have to be unemployed, they have to be aged between 16 and 60, and they must have up to a diploma level. Now, courses under this scheme are normally very demand-driven training. They are tailor-made, specifically customized courses for employers, and they are normally short training, 3 to 12 months, with high emphasis on industrial placement. But of course, along with it, you have training and theory part. In certain sectors, you also have award and certification, and most important part is that a stipend is paid to each trainee per month. And something else, the training costs, everything related to training, the training material, infrastructure, training facilities, is subsidized by the government. So that's the NSDP. Just a summary of everything on it. And here I'll just focus on this. We had already 250 projects, and more than 9,000 people have been trained under this scheme. Okay, so now just to go rapidly, we have other scheme, the Graduate Training for Employment Scheme. This is more or less under the same principle as the NSDP. the first scheme, but here the only difference is that the target audience is for graduates. Here we had around 50 projects and we trained around 700 people. So the principle is more or less the same, just the audience is different. Again, a new budgetary measure, the National Training Reskilling Scheme. So in times of pandemic, COVID, where people were losing jobs, this scheme was established, in fact, was developed to try to protect jobs, to help entrepreneurs try to reskill their people, and also where need was there, they could create new jobs. Just to give you an example, a few courses which were approved and are being run under the NTRS, you had precision manufacturing by University of Mauritius, creating artifact, garment construction, stone setting by FDI. So these courses were approved under the scheme. They have been financed. They have been they already started, in fact. Okay, so just now I spoke about a few schemes which the focus, in fact, the audience were unemployed, whether it's youth or individuals. And now we have two more schemes, and the focus is mostly on existing employees. But here, the only difference is that we work with industry association. So for example, here, we work with AMM, we work with Business Mauritius, we work with MIGSA, and other associations in different sectors. So this is specifically for the manufacturing sector, where I mentioned AMM, Business Mauritius, and MIGSA. So SSDS, Sectoral Skill Development Scheme, it's a scheme to train, to give certain skills to employees, existing employees in the sector specifically. And here we use a communal approach. We try to cluster different enterprises which could not, in fact, go for training because of the high cost or different other reasons. So here we adopt a clustering approach. Communal needs are met, but very sector-specific training. We didn't have a lot of projects approved. Around 33 projects were approved, and around 2,500 people were trained under this scheme because it's a very low-profile scheme, and we target very case-specific applications, but mostly from industry association and clustering of employers. Now we are all talking about Industry 4.0. Abroad, we are already trying to think about Industry 5.0. And here we need to prepare, whether it's manufacturers, whether it's other enterprises, we need to prepare them to embrace AI. And this scheme is specifically for that. So here we have Artificial Intelligence Skills Development Support Program, which is specifically to train people, and the target audience here is students, fresh graduates, existing professionals, lecturers, trainers, researchers, and these people can avail of this scheme through industry associations again. And we had just a few projects under this scheme because it's quite new. So it's around 6 projects and 200 people have been trained. So as I promised, I've been very, very brief, just to give you the pathway for all different schemes that I just spoke about. Here you have the mounting of the application, of course, whether it's from industry association or whether it's from employers themselves, in collaboration with training providers of their choice. So they mount the application. When I'm talking about application, I'm talking about training program. Of course, with a free component, so it's training, theory and practical, and industrial placement. And here, this is the governance part, approval, etc. Then you have the selection of training, which is done by employers, which is done by industry association themselves, and the training component, with a lot of focus on industrial placement. Then you have the most important part, the payment of stipend, payment of training costs, and an important element again is the evaluation. And in some schemes like NSDP, like GTES, employment is a must. So potential employment is there in these two schemes. In the NTRS, this is not a must, but we try to encourage employers to employ these people. So if you have any query, if you want to come towards us to build up some program, some application, we are here, myself and my colleague Vilesh. We are here to help you. So you can just call us at the HRDC or just send us an email. We'll be more than happy to guide you, to help you, and we can mount any projects that you're interested together. So thank you, and have a nice tea break.
Thank you, Tejal. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very long marathon. It has been very informative because there has been a lot of requests from institutions to share the information, the schemes they have. That's why it has been long. We have two items before us. There's a short coffee break, and then we have the brainstorming. But then, before breaking up, we have 5 minutes question time. There's some. I think there are some questions in the audience. Okay, you can go ahead with the question. Anybody with a question? Mike, please. I hope the resource person is here to reply. 5 minutes. Brief question, brief answers.
Thank you, Mr. Doman, and thank you to all the panelists for the brilliant presentations. I just have a question from Unica. It seems to me that there's a lot going on. There are many institutions, many actors on the scene, and a plethora of schemes. And at my end, I am wondering who is coordinating all this? So how are we making sure that the different schemes are addressing different gaps? How is this being coordinated? How are we ensuring that the schemes are achieving a common objective? And also, I wanted to know what mechanisms are in place to make sure that the entrepreneurs get a chance to evaluate the scheme, to give their feedback about the schemes, and what are the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place to ensure that the objectives are being met. So this is a question that any panelist can answer. And I can see that Girish is ready to answer, so he can answer if he wants.
Otherwise, I can reply this question for the ministry. I mentioned in the morning that to implement the IPSP, we have eight subcommittees. It includes all the stakeholders which are there with our concern with manufacturing. So in these committees, they share whatever schemes are there. It is the exports, taxes, I know everybody. I have listed the names there in the two tables where you will see the stakeholders are there. And whatever recommendations they make, they consult each other in the committees, and then they will come up with something. They won't duplicate. That's the main thing with the IPSP. They say there should be a real coordination. The synergy and coordination should be there, not to duplicate, as you say. That's why when we organize our skills workshop, we were in close contact with, for example, HRDC and then AMM also to see whatever it is there. Girish?
Yes, on top to what Rishi has been stating, for schemes that are managed by ADB, know that the scheme also is online. The application have to be done online, okay? So we have already monitoring for our purpose because our budget is not unlimited, is limited and supplied by MoFed with regards to the budget made to our disposal, how it is being utilized. From our part, we have an analysis that we do on every quarter with regard to how much money is being disbursed and to who is being achieved. And further to it, that committee can also make amendments to the term and condition. Initially, when we started, there was not a certain amount as plafond. Then we had to put that. And we were looking that this reach out for the targeted, industry that we are looking for, not a couple of companies. We wanted the industry to take advantage of it. Now, on a yearly basis, on top to what analysis we might be having done and monitored at our level, on a yearly basis, now Ministry of Finance, they make another assessment of this particular measure and to what extent this measure have been successful. every measure was made to boost export. We know we had COVID, and you know at the time the decision was to make to increase or to decrease that particular percentage of refund. So there was a discussion, after consultation with private sector, discussion at the level of the authorities to assess what we could do, whether it had been successful, etc. There's also something that Ministry of Finance keep on reminding us, that the scheme is not supposed to be permanent, and how we are making use of this particular fund made available. So this is there is a monitoring throughout, discussion, and at the end of the day, final discussion also with Ministry of Finance, which remain the main funder. Thank you.
The chairperson is Mrs. Isaki Garek, who is speaking in the morning. She is the director, Chief Sub-Regional Initiative Section, UNITA, Sub-Regional Office for South Africa. Over to you now, Ms. Isatu. I leave you up to the end of the session, and then I'll conclude for some minutes after this session. Over now to you. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think my job here is quite easy. I have an impressive lineup of panelists to brainstorm on the future of the manufacturing sector in Mauritius. In no particular order, I have Mr. Sanjeev Mullo, Chairman, Mauritius Standards Bureau, Mr. Girish Bhaktawonsing, Director, Economic Development Board, Mr. Kevin Ramkalon, Chief Executive Officer, Business Mauritius, Dr. Yusuf Ismail, Secretary General, Mauritius Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Bruno Dubarry, Chief Executive Officer, Association of Mauritian Manufacturing. We have heard from 3 of the speakers earlier today on various subjects in the various fields related to the work that they're doing. And as I indicated earlier, there are 5 distinguished panelists with rich and wide-ranging experience in their respective fields. We were given 1 hour for this brainstorming session. And we say, Mr. Moderator, brainstorming, so I'm sure thinking outside the box is allowed. Right. Okay, on the future of manufacturing sector in Mauritius. So we have exactly 1 hour, so I would think that then that gives us 10 minutes each, for each panelist. And the summary, you had indicated you were going to do the summary. It's coming from me.
No, the summary is from you. You can summarize for here.
Each, and then later. Oh, okay, because I saw summary and... All right, okay, all right, okay, that's fine. But we will be changing the order, the speaking order. Right. Mr. Bhaktawonsing has some engagement and would like to go immediately after he speaks. And Mr. Sanjeev Mullo would like to speak last because he's speaking to technology, innovation, ICT, the future going forward. He wants to hear from everybody and then pitch that within the context of ICT, you know. So besides that, I would say that we'll just take the order, given what we have on the paper right now. Okay, with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Bhaktawonsing. I hope I got it right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Baktawansing, noting the significance of the manufacturing sector for economic growth, diversification, value chains development, and employment, how do you see the future of the sector in Mauritius?
Thank you.
And with that in mind, I just want to give you an overview of both questions. We have 2 questions each per panelist. So with that in mind, given your perspectives, what do you consider to be the major pathways towards enhancing the development of the sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. In fact, when we are talking about the future of manufacturing, it's not developing in isolation. It's developing in a, it's a market that dictates also the production. It's developing at a time where you have, regional blocks gaining more and more momentum. We are talking at a time when African Union has themselves set forward the agenda of industrialization of Africa. We are talking at a time of the future of industrialization, at a time when the factory of the world, is facing geopolitical war when it comes to China. And we are coming at a time when you have the emergence of smart cities, middle class in Africa, okay? The model that Mauritius has been operating up to now has been a model that till yesterday was a model based on relatively cheap labor, preferential access, etc. And there has been, from that, a series of integration, how we are going to position ourselves to be competitive. So what's going to be in the new industry, in a new ecosystem that's being built, is going to be more technological savvy. Because even in Mauritius, we don't have labor. And that model of manufacturing cheap and then sell to Europe seems to be mobiles now coming at its last stage. So Mauritius will go more using technology to manufacture more complex products. We have at the start been cultivating the easiest crop, sugarcane, or manufacturing the easiest production, which is garment, as compared to complex manufacturing. Now, in this perspective, we have seen already expertise coming from Asia, from Europe. You can imagine now we don't have gold, but we are speaking about refining gold 99.9%. We are talking in Mauritius in a perspective of a small island development state, sustainability being central. We are already a number of companies engaged in electric vehicles, already in discussion in Mauritius. But the factory itself will take another dimension with automations. We are going to talk about 3D technology. We are going to talk about more soft robotics. We are talking about manufacturing better products at lower cost by making use of technology. And in the same go, attracting, our youngsters who are formed at the university or formed at technical schools to be the person who will be called to serve the particular factory in a new job that take another dimension, okay? Not associated like sweating and working, but rather smart work. Okay, this is very important. This is the way I see, I don't know if I call the industry 2.0, but it will be working along the path 3.0 and growing ahead up to 4.0. Now, coming to your second part of your questions, when you are talking about, can you remind me please, the second part?
Yeah. I think you might have answered that, but it's okay. It's how you see the future, and then the pathways, the direction of travel.
Yeah, exactly. Coming from the pathways, that's why we have studied with UNECA with regard to regional inclusive supply chain for manufacturing. UNECA is partnering with us. We have been able to secure funds from them, and they are supporting us in that study. Even at the level of the national government, there has been a study about regional chain for textile. Okay, so all this will be implemented, and we are going to look for more products, not only complex, but products where we are competitive. We'll never abandon textile apparel. We'll still have a textile apparel industry that goes more on the higher side. with regards to more sustainable manufacturing, or even seamless, where there's less cut and shoe, okay, seamless manufacturing. And with all products, where, those engaged in massive, cheap labor production will have difficulty to do. So this sort of products that we'll be doing, the latest, despite what's happening over the world with regards to manufacturing, we have been able to attract, at the moment in Mauritius, companies came from outside South Africa that will be engaged in manufacturing of more crafty golf garments. They are already nearly about to start operations. There are companies that came to us with more high-end socks, okay, that came to us. So it's going to take this line in all subsectors, but also in a number of sectors where the necessary expertise, intelligence, technicals are being required. I will always say we'll be pushing. We have a big industry of car in South Africa, and what about certain parts that can be done in Mauritius? Okay, we have been discussing that with some people, and we have been discussing also as a small island development state, the question of recycling. Okay, the question of being to use maximum of all products that we are having. We have an example in the industry where they use approximately everything in the sugarcane factory. Okay, they don't let anything go astray like that. So this is the way that we are looking forward for our industry, and obviously develop a strong identity, a brand about Made in Mauritius. Okay, and the Made in Mauritius will be in line with what we call Made for Africa, getting the raw products from Africa, the raw materials from there, and then transform it in Mauritius, and then definitely brand it and sell it so that it is distributed to many markets, conquering markets with such a brand. So that's the way I look at the future. That's the way I find the industry will be evolving, because at the end of the day, the Mauritian operators, okay, never say die. Okay, we'll keep on with our industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
With your
Thank you.
permission,
Thank
Chair,
you.
if I will take leave.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. This is not working. Thank you very much. He's leaving, but I think he spoke to very pertinent issues. Leveraging regional value chains guided by the AU agenda on industrialization. Probably that would be the accelerated industrial development for Africa strategy. And in that regard, not only looking at finished products, but also the intermediate products. The sophistication of manufacturing, kind of now transitioning from the base and going to the more sophisticated high-end pattern of production, leveraging technology in that regard. Automation, 3D tech, and to that automation, 3D tech, very important in that regard, particularly for young people that are really keen on doing smart work, not the kind of drudgery kind of work that we knew decades ago. And that in itself would enhance production efficiency. The circular economy, indirectly, he did speak to the circular economy when he said, utilizing everything. For example, you have a particular raw material, and nothing going to waste. Everything being utilized in the production process. Thank you very much for that. And now we have Mr. Kevin Ramkalwan, Chief Executive Officer, Business Mauritius. Oh, sorry. Okay, replaced by Mr. Daden Von Katasambre, Head Economic Cluster, Business Mauritius. You're most welcome. I think I heard, in the sense that, Mr. Moderator, I was to read out the bios of the speakers. So that's fine. Are we fine? Are we okay? Okay, so please introduce yourself, because I found it to be, it's rather long and we only have about 1 hour. Right, okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm Dalian Venkatasamy. I'm from Business Mauritius. I head the economy cluster. Most of my career in the private sector, except for 2 years where I was based in Paris for the Economic Development Board, what was the BOI now. So a mixed profile on that side. So we look at a number of areas at Business Mauritius. We are the Apex private sector organization. So basically we look at all sectors and we look at cross-sectoral issues. So SMEs, industrialization, innovation, R&D are part of what we're going to discuss today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Darden, can I just call your first name? Mr. Darden, we understand that your organization is implementing some commendable projects targeting the manufacturing sector with sustainability at the core. Could you share some insights on these projects? And in light of the experiences gained and lessons learned, what recommendations would you offer on the future of manufacturing in Mauritius?
Thank you, Madam. Just to be brief, I guess I won't be making a long presentation. Thanks for the opportunity to share this information. Well, in 2020, basically, we launched a pact between business, people, and nature called Nature, which basically looks at sustainable development and inclusive development by businesses. So focusing on 5 key areas. So instead of talking about SDGs and 232 indicators, we tried to look at what would be pertinent for Mauritius, for industry, for private operators, and we grouped them under 5 headings that would speak the business language on these sustainable development issues. So 5 pillars: energy transition, circular economy, biodiversity, vibrant communities, and inclusive development. And under each of these, of course, we have subjects on which we talk about with simple language, looking at KPIs, measurable impact indicators, etc. So our vision is to support businesses to commit to social and environmental responsibility and to measure their impact, not just to say that we've done this, we've done that, we put it in the annual report and then it's done. It's really to measure the impact so that we can measure individual impacts, but also at Business Mauritius level, we can consolidate impacts and really say what we are achieving on those pillars: energy transition, circular economy, including inclusive development, looking at what we're really doing within companies and within the communities on inclusive development. So it doesn't target just manufacturing companies, I have to be clear here, but it targets all companies, big and small, using non-technical language. To date, we have 61 companies on board. It's been launched right in the COVID, so it's quite interesting to already have 61 companies on board. And 12 of them are involved in manufacturing. So it does reach out to manufacturing. That's very recent, 2020. But before that, we had the Programme National d'Efficacité Énergétique, where we had more than 100 energy audits run. And that reached out to industry, hotels, but a lot of it was on industrial processes and manufacturing, with potential savings of 30% on the energy consumption of those who are set. So this is, again, something that we started small with 7 on a pilot, and then it built up to 106. And we already have people investing and saving. So that's also making business green in general and making them efficient. Next to that, over the years, we've created clubs for operators to actually share and learn best practices. So our job, we don't see our job as as a private sector organization, not just to ask things from government all the time. It's not just advocacy, it's also help business community grow and do better. So clubs for operators to share and learn. You have a club of entrepreneurs of energy transition, for example, with more than 70 members, where people really share and we discuss and we meet important actors. We have a sustainability network where sustainability managers, officers, experts actually share information, meet on specific topics. And we have a recent club, de l'économie circulaire, a circular economy club, where we have initiatives on a number of issues, including what we talked earlier before, and Bruno mentioned this morning, eco-design, circular economy, all these aspects that are going to be important for every business, but obviously even more for the manufacturing business. Of course, when we implement this, we see the challenges that come with it. So the challenges for manufacturing, obviously, that's been discussed all the way today, competing with the rest of the world. I mean, we're a small country, not much economies of scale, and we're competing with the rest of the world. The economy is very open. Most of our duties and tariff lines are open, are nearly zero, so are zero for many and very few left. And the first instinct is to say, yeah, we produce at a less competitive price. That's obvious. But probably what we don't really see very often, and which explains another aspect, is that return on investment in research and development is obviously tougher to get on a smaller market. You have less resources, you don't have much natural resources, so the return on investment is longer, takes longer because of the size of the market for R&D, technology absorption, innovation. So this is also an aspect that we should look at, and all the schemes and initiatives that we can help in terms of helping industries, helping companies adopt technology or go into research and development, we really need to make sure how well they're being implemented and how easy it is for businesses to adopt them. Very important. The second issue that we see is the connectivity to international markets. I think COVID has been a strong revelator, and this recent war is also a strong revelator on the distance and the costs when we are talking about connectivity. The third one has been discussed again since this morning, the availability of skills and talent at all levels, at production, supervisory, and technical levels. Of course, we're a small country. Every small country, people go out, travel, study abroad. Many of them don't come back. They find nicer conditions of work or salaries abroad in modern countries. They don't come back. We have a very strong brain drain from Mauritius. So that's also the challenge. We've also seen laws. In Mauritius, some laws take years to come, maybe 30 years, and some are passed within weeks. We have those extremes, and we're getting there in the spirit of regulatory impact assessment that was mentioned this morning, but I believe pre-consultations before regulations are actually passed is also a challenge, has been a challenge, and this is something we're working on, and we're working, public and private, working together on this. Despite COVID, what we did was a survey last year. Despite COVID and businesses being cash-strapped, we realized that businesses still say that they're going to maintain or increase investment in sustainable development. So that was a surprising part from our side, which means that to us, to me at least, I can see that the future of any industry, including manufacturing, is in sustainability. So what do I mean by this? It's greening, but not just greening. It's when we talk about innovation, we can do we can talk about many aspects of innovation, but if we say we want to focus on something in Mauritius, I guess that's something that we could focus on. Innovation in sustainability, and focus on that greening, on the energy transition, on the circular economy, on alternatives to fossil fuels. Look at what we're seeing. If Putin gets his $300 barrel, then our price tag for our energy bill is going to be huge. So we need to accelerate the transition on energy, for example. So what does that mean? Helping businesses do it, reducing probably the regulatory constraints on being able to produce renewable energy, that's the kind of thing. Digital absorption, we have a decreasing demography that hasn't been mentioned this morning, but our decreasing population will really push us like Japan did, to go for automation, plus the brain drain, which doesn't help. So we really need to go for automation to make sure that we can still maintain the level of the economy. And we have industrial parks that served us well in the 80s. But if we look at them today, and if I bring an investor today and visit our industrial parks, I guess it's not going to be that interesting to look at. It's four walls. That was interesting for the early textile industries. What we need today is to green these parks and to bring renewable energy to them, energy efficiency in those buildings, revamp these buildings, retrofit these buildings, management of solid and liquid waste, effluents, circular economy within those industrial parks. All of these, again, focusing on the sustainability aspect. So, to me, the going forward would really be looking at these initiatives, focus on skills, focus on innovation, and all of them, if we need to choose an area, would be make everything sustainable, go look at the sustainability direction in all sectors we're looking at. So if we're going for textiles, if we're going for manufacturing, what is the green side of the product? What is the green product that's going to trend? If we want to do bunkering petroleum products, okay, why not go for hydrogen instead? Hydrogen is going to be the next fuel for ships. So why don't we do bunkering for hydrogen instead of just looking at bunkering in general? So look at the green aspect and focus on that and become the regional green player, basically. That's really looking at the future and trying to focus on where we could focus on. I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting perspectives. Implementing the SDGs in practical terms in the manufacturing sector in Mauritius, targeting key sectors that are germane to the development or revamping of the manufacturing sector. Sustainability is key. Sustainability is key. Win-win-win for economy, for society, and for environment. So that's really what I hear. And leveraging technology and innovation, Industry 4.0, in doing so, and making Mauritius, shall we say, the green industrial hub in the region?
That would be another hub.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those very, very interesting perspectives. So we hear that should be part and parcel of our strategy going forward in terms of making the manufacturing sector in Mauritius competitive again. Now we have Dr. Ismail Yusuf Ismail, Secretary General, Mauritius Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Okay? As the SG of MCCI, with the goal of furthering the interest of your business network, could you elaborate on the challenges currently faced by the manufacturing sector? We had asked these questions before, but we want to hear it from the MCCI perspective. And in view of these challenges, what, in your view, should constitute the main policies, measures, and proposals of government? He's listening to you, to ensure transformational change in the manufacturing landscape. Dr. Ismail.
Thank you, Chair. I will start by saying two things. What we've discussed today is important, but there's an important fundamental point we need to address. And that point is not aptitude, but attitude. When you go to school, I've lectured in many universities in Mauritius and abroad, you ask the youth, what do you want to do when you finish? In Mauritius, I want to get a job. In most countries, I want to be an entrepreneur. I go on Saturday to the market. Everyone stops me and asks me, can you find a job for my son or for my daughter? That is common. I go to a wedding, the same thing, can you find a job for my son and daughter? And ask them, but can they do something for themselves? They say, no, they want to get a job. Fundamental point is, as a nation, we are not an entrepreneur nation. That is the question we should be asking. I can see a friend of mine who did mechatronics. She should be running today an industry for herself. Agree. The problem we have is as a nation, we have a mindset of not taking risk. And that is an issue that we face. No matter how much government will come and support, entrepreneurship comes in this country not by choice, but by force. You tried everything else, nothing works, like we sing Creole Bat Bate, and then you start doing something because you're forced to become an entrepreneur. It's never entrepreneurship by choice. That has to change if you want to have an industrial nation. You know, wearing a white shirt and a black suit going to work is interesting. I can see a group of youngsters here should be running their own business. It's something that we need to address. No matter how much curriculum you want to force on somebody, if the attitude of entrepreneurship is not here, then we will fail. No matter how much government support, money, financing, technology will be dumped on us, we will not succeed until we address the fundamental issue of a nation who wants to be in the comfort zone and who wants to be entrepreneur by force and do not want to take risks. Secondly, when you want to introspect companies, which we discuss on a lot of the time, they start a business, and for some reason, you ask them, can you invest in research? They say it costs money. Because like my grandma will say, her curry is the best, but no one else really like her curry, but they will say they like it, to please her. That is what we do. We think our product is the best, but we don't do any research outside to know what is the product which is required by the consumers. Because my generation has done it this way, and we are not here to change that attitude. So first of all, investment in research or market research is not a cost. It gives you that advantage. Going and listening to people is important. I think one of the mistakes that companies make, they don't listen to anyone, except they listen to themselves. I think it's important to break that barrier of understanding what goes on. I'll give you, we talk about challenges. I think what we've said, the challenge has been said. But there's a fundamental question of understanding the risk and the culture of business in this country. The culture of business is father starts a business by force. You can get a job in government. He's refused jobs everywhere. He starts. His son's got enough money. Send the son to university. Come back. The son become the CEO without much experience, and that's how it works. But you ask the same company, can you appoint a professional CEO to run your company? You sit in the board. Or you sit just outside as a shareholder, let the professional run your company? The answer is no. So how can you run a company? Just yourself deciding your own future. That culture needs to change for us to make that quantum leap in terms of industry. You will ask any company, can you open your capital to a foreigner? You say no, they will come and steal my business and steal my ideas, steal my business and go. That is the reaction you get. No. If you want to use the FTA's agreement, you will have to open your capital to others for you to expand. Otherwise, you remain where you are. These are the issues that companies face as in terms of introspection. And no matter, and the other fundamental mistakes sometimes government make in this country is to assist too much the private sector industry. You want to pay, you want to take them do the marketing, you want to pay their hotel, you want to pay everything, and find a market, give them subsidies, everything that requires given by government. And you're somehow destroying the risk appetite of these entrepreneurs. These are things that needs to be addressed as a nation. as a group of people, as a society, of how risk we are. What is our attitude to go beyond what we normally do? That is essential, I think, in terms of addressing. Because no matter how, we can have another 50 workshops. If that is not addressed, we will not succeed. Going forward, yes, that synergy between public and private is important. But most importantly, what we need to do is to address some fundamental flaws in the system, in the way we do things. For example, today you ask somebody to go and go cross-border. You start your business here, go and replicate the same thing in Madagascar. In Madagascar? No, I get kidnapped. That is a reaction. I'll go and work in South Africa, as soon as you land in South Africa, the lion is waiting to eat you. But we don't have this appetite to go. And no matter how much government can do, we can talk about government support and so on and so forth. If you're not prepared to fight the element, I don't think you will be able to succeed as an industry. Yes, there are issues faced by all companies in terms of comparative advantage, but it's up to you to create that by having better research, by having better performance, and beat your competitors. We can beat our competitors. Mauritius has a brand. When you go overseas, you see a T-shirt made in Mauritius, it's a brand. But we forget that our country is a branded country. We don't have issues with child labor. We don't have issues with anything. This is the brand that needs to be built. Because once you have a brand, the industry will follow. Yes, you have the problem of attitude. Yes, on one side. But we forget that we have an asset called the Mauritian brand. Everyone trusts the Mauritian brand. When you see something come from China or from Bangladesh, there's some suspicious about the quality. But when you say it comes from Mauritius, automatically, people trust. You want to, yes, we're saying about pharmaceutical industry, nutraceutical, a product made in Mauritius to go for the African market for pharmaceutical. People can trust the quality because the brand is strong for you to trust the quality. Because in other countries, you say it's come from X country, I'm not going to name it, they say the product is fake and you don't trust that product. These are the fundamental questions that has to be addressed. Yes, technology is important because in terms of productivity, we've seen it earlier. We are not productive enough. We are not productive because our labor is not producing as much as we can. The issue of skills, which has been mentioned many times, and including that end, is an issue. Because why is it an issue? Because we don't value le métier as something, as a job. We think a métier is for somebody who has failed school. It is not a failure. Today, you want to create parts, car electronics, for example. Not because you have failed CP, you have to go and do car electronics. You can be a degree holder and learn about car electronics. Batteries. All cars now are going towards batteries. There's not a single person in this country who has done any study on how to look at service electric cars. There's nothing done. And yet, we've seen there's about 10% of cars which are electric on the road. Tomorrow your car breaks down, you don't know what to do. You will go and change your battery. And these batteries can be repaired and should be repaired. Because otherwise, Dada has talked about green economy. We will dump our battery, which is more polluting than the existing batteries in the environment. So preparing is important. We want to have a jewelry. I say my good friend there, we want to have a jewelry industry. It takes 5 years to get somebody to learn how to polish a diamond. How to assemble takes time. I think you're the only one who can do testing on diamond. Do you know whether this diamond is real diamond or zircon or whatever it is, or plastic? But these are things that is required, not skill, because soft skills. Everyone wants to do management, marketing, That's all. But these are things that needs to be addressed. I will stop here. I'll leave the floor back to you. I hope I haven't upset anyone.
I like that, going beyond what we normally say, thinking outside the box. Change of mindset, attitude, having that entrepreneurship spirit and ready to take risk. Size is not everything. Though small, Mauritius itself is a brand. Made in Mauritius is a brand, and we could ride that wave. Okay? And apart from that, the issue of skills, métier. Some métiers, Senegal, Gambia now coming, could be considered like, okay, it's a white-collar job, we go for that. But in this day and age, most people are not satisfied with that. And you see people in these sectors doing very well, and even kind of leveraging regional and even global value chains. So we need champions. Where we've had successful people, where are they? Can they be the champions for young people? And probably make it more sexy, given the technology, the technological aspects and the acceptance by young people of technology, not doing it the old way. Research and development, important. Continuous improvement. And we really need to invest in R&D. But probably how we do that, if you look at maybe small and medium-sized enterprises, could we have like an ecosystem linked with university, manufacturers, and let's find an ecosystem for R&D, linking that with probably production. So we need to find a way of making R&D look profitable in the short, medium, and long term. So that's it. Change of mindset, change of attitude, ready to take risk. See occupations in these so-called major areas as really very important occupation. And they also, like you talked about the diamond polishing, it's skills that takes years to learn. So have that appreciation. And government not also babysitting the private sector too much and at the end of the day making them risk averse. It's good to help them with the enabling environment, to be facilitative in terms of seeing them grow and be competitive, but not to babysit them too much. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Next, we have Mr. Bruno Dubarry, Chief Executive Officer, Association of Mauritian Manufacturers. In your capacity as the CEO of such an important private sector collective, with first-hand knowledge of their inner workings, could you elaborate on the challenges currently faced by the manufacturing sector? And with this knowledge, what, in your view, should be the main policies, measures, and proposals of government towards ensuring transformational change in the manufacturing landscape?
Thank you, Chair. In fact, most of the manufacturing sector in Mauritius has not been developed in terms of value chains. So, being an association of Mauritian manufacturers, I think it relates to what my colleagues have said on the spirit or attitude of entrepreneurship. It's also a question of entrepreneurship. What do you do within the organizations where you belong? How do you try to change the culture itself? And it also relates to what my colleague Daden also said regarding what Business Mauritius is doing specifically on sustainability. Within the AMM, knowing that a lot of our companies, members, are not really structured to be able to tackle these challenges by themselves, whether for reasons of skills lacking or the size of the company, the financial support or anything. We identified their needs during 2 years. We had some focus groups and we tried to understand how they were appropriating themselves the challenges of going towards smart and sustainable manufacturing. We understood that what they were lacking essentially is a place where they can share their challenges and how they can learn together and hear what is working and how it can be duplicated within other companies and other sectors. So we initiated a program since 2020 that we entitled L'Industrie d'Humain, which is in Creole somehow smart manufacturing. And we focused on 3 pillars of circular economy. The first was eco-design. So we relied on the financial support of the HRDC, which has a scheme which is the SSDS and helps sectoral development. So we had 6 months. Am I right, Samuel? 6 months? A little bit more. 8 months of collective work with our members, supported by a foreign expertise, which is in Reunion Island. It's called Calitropic, and they're specialized on bioeconomy. So basically, we had a mix of audits, training, and specific recommendations for each company. And what we are trying to achieve as an organization is not only documenting and helping companies in their process of change, but also building guidelines for any other companies that would go through that type of questioning and search for new models. And at the end, we understood that other type of parcours, as we call them, needed to take it from there. So the second one on which we're working is sustainable supply chain management. Same spirit, which is audit, training, and identifying this time collective opportunities between our sectors and companies. Because in the wake of issues such as Ukraine war and others, we see the challenges on the supply chains. And hearing ICFM earlier that they would have some schemes on how do you support financially also supply chains and import of raw materials, it's important to understand that any budget measures or any support from the government, there is the big players of the private sector that are really structured, that have the means to seize these opportunities most of the time. And then you have, I would say, the majority of companies that are not structured to analyze and take profit of these measures. So this is where the associations are interesting, to try to intermediate with institutions, and if it's not sufficient, advocate to elaborate year on these measures. And it's all about preparation. How do you prepare a company to seize these opportunities? This is really a structural challenge, and I think that it's rather a collective work. And in that sense, we are, I think, doing some complementary work with MCCI and Business Mauritius and other institutions, because in the end of the day, manufacturing sector is not only in one association. So I think it's all about building processes within the associations that create the right environment for change. And what is interesting with associations is that it's a place where you can question yourself without this reflex of competition. There is somehow a bubble where people feel safe to share some challenges, not feeling the pressure or the judgment of their peers, but rather understanding that alone they won't be able to tackle these challenges. And somehow many other entrepreneurs have already gone through these process and are willing to share. I recall one entrepreneur, I think he will be talking tomorrow, Kendall Tong from Artinitz. I think one thing that has made his success is that he is a really open person on how, on the fact of describing his challenges and tackling his challenges. This is really an open book in terms of manufacturing industry manager. So being so open on what he's going through and how he's trying to tackle and what type of process he's putting in place and what kind of mindset he's trying to change within his board has helped us a lot to craft these support programs. So I think this is really where we need to go. It's deep dive into the reality of the entrepreneurs and those especially that are already moving fast, that have understood that there is no area of their business where they can be mediocre. They have to be excellent everywhere. This is their own words. And you understand that with this type of mindset, it's a never-ending work. And this is where the institution can come and exploit that knowledge and share it to the collective and try to enhance the level of the sector itself. So in terms of measures, I think our organizations are already doing a great job. I mean, every year we come and we try to refine our measures, propositions, and I must recognize that each year there is some improvement, even in the public-private dialogue. We have this year the chance to have been working within economic commissions at the level of the Economic Development Board. There was a sectoral economic commission on which I was involved and where we had 8 technical working groups. One was on food security. And that level of exchange with representatives of ministries of agro-industry and other sectors was really enlightening on trying to qualify the real challenges. Are they at the level of policy? Are they at the level of coordination? Or are they at the level of projects? And I think that's a type of tools that is really useful today to try to target year on the right path for smart manufacturing. So I could go on, but I think that it's good to maybe have some questions or some reactions on all that has been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dubari. I think you spoke to the need to prepare companies to seize opportunities, particularly in regard to an example being value chains development, which they are not really into as yet. So thus the need to really adequately prepare them. And in doing so, encourage them to talk about their needs. You create an enabling environment where they could discuss what their needs are, what their challenges are, encourage a co-learning kind of ecosystem for them to learn together and then come up with collective solutions that could help, let's say, prepare guidelines for maybe other companies that may have similar issues in future. And in that regard, the need to manage the change process. Because change is really not easy. We all have this inertia. And we need some kind of facilitation to be able to get us to move. You talked about big players and small players. I'm not sure whether you bring them together for small players to really benefit from the structures and processes of this as much as you can. So I think it's really good to get big and small players together, because the small players could really help in terms of when we talk about value chain development, intermediate products, etc. you review and refine your strategies regularly, and thus fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement. So I think that's also very, very profound. So thank you for those thoughts. Now we come, you've heard all of them, Mr. Sanjeev Mullo, Chairperson, Standards Council, Mauritius Standards Board. Your experience in enterprise management is well recognized. In this regard, this meeting would like to hear your views on the importance of ICT. We've been talking technology, we've been talking the future in the manufacturing sector. And given your perspectives, what would you recommend as a way forward? So here we're looking at the specific domain of ICT and probably other associated areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. I've learned a lot and taken in profuse notes from what I've heard with other panel members. I'd like here to take a very broad, almost planetary perspective of our civilization and then draw down to very specific examples whereby we can come to the Mauritian context and look at the way forward together. Now, I just brought one slide, doesn't mean anything. In fact, it's just an illustration. We, over the ages, as human beings, we have tried to survive and thrive. That's all we do. When you talk of business, you're trying to survive and thrive. And this is where I join my friend, Dr. Yusuf, when he talks about the risk profile of our Mauritian lot, let's put it this way. Now, there's been, to be able to survive and thrive, we've had to go through major revolutions in history of our planet. 50,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers. But then we settled. We became agrarian. But the fact that you get into agriculture, you have to organize yourselves. You need to get a leader. You get a basic unit of society. You need to have services towards this environment. So the whole civilization changes. And this is important. But then, the next major revolution was we discovered oil. In fact, for those of you who maybe are not aware, we were killing whales in the past to be able to get fat and oil so that we could get light in the evenings. And that was being done in Europe and everywhere. And luckily, when we discovered oil in the mid-1800s, then we stopped using whales. So it's ironical. Petrol has helped whales. Fossil fuel has helped whales. Anyway, that was very important because with the advent of oil, you had the invention of the combustion engine, and then you had cars, you had the logistics changed, the way we did business, the way we would import, export, transport goods and materials and commerce, the whole thing changed. And I don't have to tell you, the next big thing is the digital revolution. And we all know this. And I've just used a parallel here. I don't know if you're aware of a company called Standard. Standard was by Rockefeller. Everybody must have heard of Rockefeller here. And Standard became such a big company that the government, because of antitrust law, had to break it into 73 small companies. At the time, Rockefeller they were broken down into 73 companies. He had to meet all his 73 managers, and they came to report to him. So just to tell you that now we have the modern Standard, we have Google. Google is the fastest growing company on the planet. And now this is the big picture. This is the big trend in the whole world. I won't talk of the Apples, the Elon Musk, and all the big platforms that are heading business, and how the Fortune 500 have changed from the traditional oil and construction industry and banks and all the rest. All of them have become digital platforms. Now I'll come down to examples that we could use in Mauritius. Now you will appreciate that doesn't mean when we go digital, you deny the industry or you deny agriculture. I'll give you just one example. You have a big brand. In fact, it's the biggest brand. They are manufacturers of agricultural machinery. You must have heard of John Deere in the whole world. Now, John Deere manufactures agricultural machinery. They use their machinery with sensors, Industry 4.0 and whatever you call it, so they get a lot of data on the ground, on the soil. They know the height that they need to put their plow, the kind of soil, the irrigation they need and everything. But they convert this into important data. This data they convert into insights. And you can take decisions based on those insights. They even know that in Russia, although now is not the right time to talk about Russia, but they know that in Russia, the permafrost is losing 50 kilometers every year. They even know what plant, what cultivation, what crop you can plant in those areas. I'm just trying to illustrate that how you can use those three pillars at the same time. And the same thing can be done in Mauritius. Now, you know what John Deere does? Not only they sell tractors, but with all the information, they have thousands and thousands of operations in the whole world, in all the continents, in all the climate zones. And they have this data, they convert it into insights. And you know what they do with it? They sell it to all those who are interested in commodity futures, whether it's sugar, whether it's coffee, whether it's the big guys like Nestle, and it is added revenue for them. Why I mentioned John Deere? Because in Mauritius, we cannot compete, and we have to admit it, and I'm sure my friends will agree with me. You cannot compete with China. We cannot compete with Vietnam. We cannot compete with other important stations. Although we are trying to do it. My friend Girish, before leaving, he said that we need to get into more complex products. We need to add talent, technology, capital, put it together so that we can compete. But we have intelligent people in this country. And the interesting thing is, in this country, we understand English, French. We are a democratic country. There is sun, sea, and sand. And we are also multilingual, multi-civilizational, multi-religious. We understand, the Muslim understands the Hindu, understands the Christian, understands the Buddhist, and it goes on like this. What I mean to say is that we have this multicultural hybrid intelligence that very few countries can claim to possess. When you add all this together, we could get our young guys from the very tender age of 16 to 24, get into AI. AI is the next big thing. We don't have an AI hub in Mauritius. Now, you'll tell me, come on, we are not like the USA, we are not like China, we don't have the means. How do you expect us to get into AI? But it's very simple. Bring in a few guys, young guys. These are the next big tech titans, and you've seen how many startups, how many unicorns have come up in other countries. And in India is my goodness, a drove of them. So this can happen in Mauritius, whereby the government or the private sector, even the big boys, can bring in people from California, from Israel, from China, because the ones who will get into AI will rule the world in the next decades. There's no doubt about it. Whether you call it war technology, whether you call it products, whether you call it services, whether you call it multi-digital platforms, everything is becoming a platform. A platform can produce, can consume, can sell. And when you are onto a platform, you are connected to everyone at the same time. It's ubiquitous and it's on real time. These data can be converted onto platforms. And this is where I think our intelligence, in terms of the government, in terms of private sector, in terms of bodies like UNICA and all the rest, we need to have, when I'm talking of intelligence here, I'm talking of reading the signaux faibles, as we say in French, Bruno, isn't it? Les signaux faibles, quoi, okay? We need to be able to read those signaux faibles and interpret them, because this is what's coming. We can't lag behind. The days of manufacturing, I'm not saying are over. All I am saying is that we need to add a digital layer to the products that we are producing so that we can become platform enabled. We can upload data which can be used to sell even more sophisticated services. And in Mauritius, we have no iron, we have no silicon, we don't have all those resources. we can use our human resource, for which I have huge respect. You have listened to the thought leaders on the panel, see the level of their discussion, and in Mauritius, if given the opportunity, the government, private sector, parastatals, we can all get together in a coalition so that we bring about a thought leadership that will spur more openness and more innovativeness. And I like to use this word innovativeness. Everybody talks of innovation. Nobody talks of innovativeness. Innovativeness is about looking for opportunities, solving problems in a different way, and thinking about the future whilst doing these two things. And innovativeness, you can show it the whole day. Whether it's in health, I could give you thousands of examples, but of course we are pressed for time, and I know you need to, Chair, you need to respect the time of everyone. So I would just like to conclude by saying we need to look far into the future and make sure that we are future ready. In Mauritius, as I told you, we have important, I suppose, qualities. Leverage those qualities. Get young guys from, there are, in Ukraine, for example, you have those young guys in Estonia and all the rest. Get a few of these bunch of guys. They would like our son, C and Sen, come over and spend time, create and spur and create that hub so that we can bring out this technology, talent, capital, put it together and offer the whole world a product which is platform-based, and add it to our technology and our manufacturing sector and create a whole disruptive revolution whereby we get in phase with the AI revolution when it's coming in. In fact, it's here already. Dr. Ismail was talking about batteries. It's the same thing for chips. It's a new economy coming in, and we are still stuck in the traditional economy. So we need to see what's coming forward and bring everyone to the page so that we can be there when the sun will really rise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mulom. Now I see why you said you wanted to speak last, because you spoke to a subject that's really an enabler of industrialization, manufacturing, whether agricultural productivity. There's no way we're going to say we won't do agriculture again. But you started from the fundamental. Our decisions, from the beginning of time, our decisions and actions have been dictated by that instinct to survive and thrive. We need to invent, reinvent. Necessity is the mother of invention, and we're at that stage of our development strategy when we really need to push it a notch further. And in relation to Mauritius, small, cannot compete with big and emerging powers, but we can leverage our comparative and competitive advantages. And a very important one being our human capital. We have human capital. Today at lunch we were talking about the diversity in this country, and diversity being strength. So really very important to leverage that human capital. Should be pivotal in terms of our development going forward. And of course, with that human capital, if you want to go digitalization, artificial intelligence is the now and the future. The fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. But within that space, thought leadership is really very important. And not only to talk innovation, but innovativeness, how we do things. The business models, including what kind of business models, entrepreneurship models that we can leverage. So we need to think continuously. We need to be in that survival and thriving mode. It never stops. So, and encourage also cross-fertilization. bring in people from other cultures, from other countries, because we do not know it all, we cannot do it all, we do not have all it takes. So bring in, okay, we have the diversity here, but outside Mauritius, you also have more diversity and talent. So bring that talent, and cross-fertilization with such talent would also help in terms of the future, or would be pivotal in terms of the future of manufacturing in this country. Very, very important perspectives have been shared. And I think your job has been made easy. We have I have attempted to summarize what came out of the discussions, the different perspectives that have been shared, and all matter. What is now important is how to connect the dots. How to connect the dots going forward, because all the perspectives matter. So going forward, this is really what we need. And I think you could say that what you've gotten what you set out to achieve, I mean the ministry. And it's a brainstorming session of about 1 hour. Probably, I don't know whether we've gone beyond that. But I think that it will continue. This is the beginning. This is part of the process. And going forward, this space, as the minister said, this space giving private sector the space, interacting with the public sector, will continue. It should be a continuous process, and I am sure that we will definitely get to where we want to. Thank you so much. There was no Q&A in this session, so that's why I did not invite that, but thank you so much. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Chair, for this wonderful session, and thank you also for the panelists for their insightful comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of this session. We have had a long day. We have spoken since the morning about skills development, trade opportunities, sustainable production, productivity indicators. We have seen the role, the important role of UNECA, EU and UN, and then we have talked about some incentives, AFCTA, incentive offered to SMEs, export schemes, and then IFC and HRDC. We have reached the end of this today's policy dialogue. On behalf of UNECA and Ministry of Industry, we thank all participants and all panelists for being patient. We have a bit overtaken by time, but for being patient, and then for their presence also. Thank you very much. And I think thanks also to our staff who has been there. And see you tomorrow for the next session on textile and clothing. Thank you very much. Yeah.